Yeah, we're live. Hi, guys.
It's incredibly prophetic, and I think we're about to see 2025 is the exact middle of the ninth week. By the time the 10th week starts, the world is already about 300 years into the millennium. Is that veil thinning? Is that restraint or loosening? And does that allow evil agents to bestow upon us technology that we might not have been able to create on our own? By that year, everything will be done, everything will be set in place.
Hey, Dan, good to see you.
Josh, I cannot believe how many things are in the Dead Sea Scrolls regarding 2025 and beyond. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. I just did an interview with someone else talking about events that are going to happen in 2025, but you've discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls, I mean, these are ancient scrolls that are talking about the time that we're living in now and the end times. We will get to 2025 in a moment, but first, a word from our sponsor. There's bad turbulence ahead. The economy is a minefield right now, ready to detonate and destroy the wealth and dreams of the unprepared. Bank failures, de-dollarization, debt, but amidst the chaos, a beacon of hope emerges. Kevin Sorbo, screen legend Hercules, Christian actor, and outspoken activist for the people, with his economic crisis toolkit, crafted in partnership with the experts at Noble Gold, Sorbo is now on a mission to help everyday Americans navigate the coming nightmare. This shock-proof toolkit is your compass through the turmoil, with recession-proof strategies, inflation-busting techniques, and opportunity-seizing skills to help you not just survive, but thrive in the bedlam. The crisis threatens to derail your financial future, but you now can stay on track and emerge stronger than ever. And the best part? This shield of knowledge is yours, absolutely free. Don't become another casualty. Enlist in Sorbo's Wealth Warrior ranks today and arm yourself with the tools and tactics you need to protect your hard-earned assets. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com now and sign up for the Economic Crisis Toolkit. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. There's always a risk of investment and there's no guarantee of any kind. But some people just, Josh, some people just say, oh, the Dead Sea Scrolls, we shouldn't even, listen to anything that's in that. We only want to listen to scripture. But meanwhile, Jesus quoted
Hey, Phil, good to see you, bro.
Scrolls. Can you explain?
Yeah, so it's really fascinating.
Yeah, guys, John Pounders has got a thing on Facebook, and I left him the link to the AusD code and what the names mean and how Dorothy means gift from God and things like that. So he actually spoke back and said, is this you doing it, Colin? So hopefully he's going to watch it and I might get some airplay with him.
About the Dead Sea Scrolls is we actually do see an instance where Jesus is quoting the Dead Sea Scrolls about himself. So in Matthew 11:2-6, Jesus is talking about what prophecies that the Messiah is going to fulfill. Things like the blind will receive their sight and the lame will walk.
Diane, I need someone like John Pounders to get it going. I can't do it. I'm banned everywhere I can go on YouTube, so I can't post it on YouTube. They threatened to take my last channel off me. So I need someone like him to help me.
Lepers are cleansed, things like that. But then he also says that the dead will be raised up. Well, when we look back in the Old Testament, we can find all of those prophecies except for that one. Nowhere in the Old Testament does it say that the Messiah is going to raise the dead.
Okay, it's glaring already. Hang on.
Jesus is quoting a Dead Sea Scroll called the Messianic Apocalypse, where it does say that the dead will be raised up from the Messiah. And we know that he's quoting that because all of the apostles seem to have known exactly what he was talking about. Nobody
Thanks,
asked,
Phil.
Jesus, where are you getting that from? The Old Testament doesn't say anything about that. They would have been very.
I gave him the outline of what the names means, like what Glinda means and Toto and all that. And he read that and he replied to that. So it must have struck a chord in him. He must have said, gee, this is pretty interesting. Otherwise, he would have just written me off as a nut job.
Very familiar with this Messianic Apocalypse scroll and the prophecies that were contained within it. So the scrolls are absolutely fascinating. There's a lot of accurate prophecy in there. And I have not found anything in the scrolls that contradict the Bible. And it seems like the New Testament supports at least looking into the Dead Sea Scrolls, because they're quoted quite a bit throughout the New Testament.
Now, I've done an interview a long time ago with someone else regarding the Dead Sea Scrolls, but the stuff that you uncovered, they didn't even touch it. They didn't, I mean, it's like you've done this expedition.
Phil, if he plays my odds and my channel gets a lot more subscribers, you will too, because you can post your link here for your channel. So it'll be a win-win for us both, brother.
And uncovered amazing things about the end times. I
Okay,
can't believe it. But can you just explain the history of the scrolls?
Yeah, absolutely. So the scrolls come from a time that's often referred to as the 400 silent years, in between the Old and New Testaments, and they were discovered. They were discovered in Qumran in 1947. A Bedouin shepherd was throwing rocks into nearby caves, and he heard something that sounded like breaking pottery. And when he looked into it,
hey, Lars, good to see you, mate.
There were clay vessels that were filled with ancient scrolls, and that's what was discovered in the cave. In the caves. So between 900 and 1,000 parchments were discovered, and they contained sacred writings in ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. And generally speaking, with very few exceptions, the scrolls were discovered to have been written about 100 or 200 years before the birth of Christ. So this would have been in the intertestamental period between the Old Testament and the New Testament, during that 400 years. And this verified dating of the origin of the Dead Sea Scrolls is really important because they contain an amazing amount of detailed prophecy, and we know that they're not.
That's a great idea, Diane.
Faked. And the prophecies have to do with the first and the second coming of the Messiah. It's also important too because there's a lot of rumors going around, especially in college campuses, that the Bible that we have now is changed. Like the Old Testament that we have has been changed throughout the years, and we can't really trust it. Well, since the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, we can prove no, like our Old Testament is exactly how it's supposed to be. It was not changed in the Middle Ages at all.
That's the Muslims who claim that the most, that the Bible's been corrupted, yet they use the Bible. What hypocrites.
Because the Dead Sea Scrolls contain all the books of the Old Testament except Esther, and then a lot of other scrolls as well. So we can go and compare all of those scrolls to our Old Testament and actually see that it lines up. It's completely accurate. And so because of that, and because of the prophecies that are contained within it, the Dead Sea Scrolls are incredibly important, and very thankful that we have access to them in our time today.
So who wrote the different scrolls? And also, I'd like you to explain about the Essenes as opposed to the Pharisees.
Yeah. So they were written by the Zadokian priesthood, and at the time, and it's
stay safe, Phil.
Funny because when you read the Old Testament, everything in Israel seems to make sense. But then when you start the New Testament, everything's different. They're occupied by Rome. There's Pharisees, Sadducees, and there are Essenes. Now we don't hear the word Essene in the Gospels. That term was coined later by Josephus. But you have these different factions. So basically, what happened during that intertestamental period is Israel, and I go through the whole history in the book, but Israel basically got themselves involved in a bunch of conquests, and they ended up getting occupied by various groups. One of them was Antiochus Epiphanes, and we know that from the desecration of the temple and all that. Well, apparently part of that time was Antiochus told the Jewish people, like, okay, well, you can do some of your Jewish things, but you have to adopt certain things that we want. One of the most important was the calendar, and so the Pharisees and the Sadducees basically stayed behind. Now at this time they weren't all called Pharisees and Sadducees. Those names came later after this split up. But there was a group within the Jewish
I'm guessing
no, we're not going to do that.
Diesel would like that cat food.
They first, if I remember right, they first escaped to Egypt and settled there for a little while, and then came back to Qumran. And those were the Zadokian priests. So
Prayers for your
basically,
electricity,
by the
mate.
time that you get to the time of Jesus, you have three main interpretation of scripture, three main lines of thought, three main groups that would teach different things. So the Pharisees were really the ones that were in power. They had their interpretation, which is based on what they called oral Torah. And then you had the Sadducees, who essentially didn't really believe in anything. The Sadducees, like they got so far off that they didn't believe in angels or the afterlife, anything like that. And they was just to go along with whatever the government says, so you can have the easiest life possible because there's nothing after this anyway. So that was the Sadducees. And then you had the Essenes. The Essenes were the ones they were found all throughout Israel, but they were the ones that followed the interpretations of the Zadok priests in Qumran. Yeah. And their interpretation was basically what ours is today.
So I like that super soldier talk. I like that sort of talk because I believe it's true.
Of the Old Testament, except that they were still waiting for the Messiah. But they believed in the literal interpretation of the Old Testament. They believed in the prophecies. One other major difference is the Pharisees believed that prophecy did not exist anymore, that God wasn't giving any new revelations or anything, whereas the Essenes believed that God was. And we see that all throughout the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's a ton of prophecy in there. Most of it is about Christ, the Messiah's first coming, and then some of it's about the second coming. But it mainly, for them, the next big thing was going to be the arrival of the Messiah, his first coming. And the Essenes did believe in one Messiah with two, appearances. That there was going to be a first coming, that he actually would die to absolve our sins, and they even had that written down. There's a scroll called 11, if I remember right, it's 11Q13. And that scroll is really important because they actually write out exactly when the Messiah was supposed to come. And again, this was written a couple hundred years before Jesus. So the Essenes knew exactly when the Messiah would come, what to look for, what he would be doing. But there were these other prevailing thoughts at the time. That's why when you read through the Gospels, why there are times that Jesus can go into a crowd and like thousands of people immediately get saved before he even really says anything. They just get saved. It's really easy. But then there are other times that he can talk to certain people till he's blue in the face and they're just not budging. That they're willing to say that this can't be the Messiah. He's full of demons. They'd rather blaspheme him rather than accept it. Well, that's the difference between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because the Pharisees believed that the Messiah would be basically a military leader that would lead them in war against the Romans, and so that was the Pharisee interpretation. And then that later, like a different Messiah would come. So you had these two different interpretations. So the Dead Sea Scrolls are the records that were left from the Zadokian priests in Qumran. And so not every Essene in Israel lived in Qumran. They lived all throughout Israel, but they followed the priests that were in Qumran, and they followed their teachings and in their interpretation. So yeah, there's a really rich history there that I get into it really in depth in the book, but it's fascinating to see that, and then to see what's even more mind-blowing is that the Essenes ended up leaving Qumran after Jesus died and was resurrected and ascended. Sometime after that, because they knew that the destruction of the temple was coming. They knew that this huge persecution was going to happen. So they left their scrolls behind. I
wonder how they knew this. I wonder how they got this info. Like Jonathan Kahn gets info, but I wonder how these guys get it, because they must be getting it from God to be so accurate.
Took some with them, but they left.
How do they get
copies of their scrolls behind in Qumran, and then they left. And there's a big question in academia. They're wondering, like, where did they go? Why did they leave? Like, it's like a big mystery. Well, it's really no mystery at all, because Jesus told them, go out, make disciples. I mean, they heard the Great Commission, they took it seriously, and so that's exactly what they did. They obeyed their Messiah. And we as Christians,
we are boss. We are super soldiers for Christ.
We actually do come from the Essenes. It doesn't mean that we are Essenes, but
we don't need our DNA changed.
We come from that line of teaching, which is just absolutely mind-blowing. And without the Dead Sea Scrolls, we would have no idea. And
right now. Get the LDV for people move.
And it just makes you wonder, like when you were describing that Jesus would go to some places and they would not even listen to him, and other places they would all just get saved. If those people really were then the Essenes, because they knew what to look for with Messiah coming, and as opposed to the Pharisees saying he has to be more of a military figure. So super fascinating. But you were talking about the accuracy in your, it's a 2-volume set and books, and it's really amazing. And it's the accuracy of the Essenes prophetically. Now tell me about the prophetic, the accuracy regarding Herod.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there was an Essene named Menachem, and this was recorded by Josephus. And the Essenes were known for having completely accurate prophecy, and we get that from outside sources as well, like Josephus says that. And I should mention too, in the book, I do have all of what Josephus wrote about the Essenes in an appendix in the 2nd volume. And if people want to get the book, the best place is prophecywatchers.com. And if people get the book, make sure you get both of them, because it's a 2-volume set, and one book won't make sense without the other, so you want to get both. But anyway, so there was a scene named Menachem, who, when Herod was basically in school, when he was very young, before he was king, Menachem gave Herod this prophecy that he would be king, and basically it would start off all right, but he would end up getting really corrupt and end up being a really terrible king over time. Well, Herod at the time wasn't even looking for anything like that. Like he wasn't, he didn't know that he was going to be king. He wasn't set up to be the, king of Israel or anything like that. But over time, that, as we know, that ended up happening. So Herod called Menachem back back to have another conversation with him and ask him, okay, well, you were right about this prophecy, so how long do I have? And I forget the exact number that Menachem said. I think it was like 35 years or something. But when you do the math, he was right. And then reiterated again that he was going to end up becoming corrupt, which that absolutely did happen. And Herod had a terrible end to his reign. That's just one small example of how accurate the prophecies of the Essenes were. And we actually see that same Essene later in the book of Acts, and I believe it's Manaheim or something like that. Manaheim, I think it's translated as that in Acts. But when you actually go back to the original language and look at who this guy is, it's that same Menachem guy. The Essenes lived a long time. They lived almost twice as long as the Pharisees and the Sadducees, as their contemporaries, because the word Essene actually just means healer. So apart from their interpretations of the Bible and the prophecies, they also knew how to. They had a lot of knowledge about natural cures and natural healing and stuff like that. And Josephus records that as well. So because of that, because of their diet, probably also because of the area that they lived in, they lived to be.
It's that free energy Tesla's on about. It came up through the ground, and he couldn't switch the power off, and he blew up his radio tower because he couldn't stop the power. It just was too strong. But somehow he harnessed electricity from the ground, not the water, the ground, and it was free energy.
Over 100 years old most times, like around 100.
And that was in something like 1907 or something. It was a long time ago.
20. So they had extremely long lifespans as compared to the Pharisees and Sadducees. So that's where that word Essene comes from. It just means healer. But so that's just one prophetic example of many. But it's fascinating.
Oh, man.
It's absolutely fascinating. Now I want to go to the solar calendar. Now I'm going to be really honest with you. When I first was reading about it in your series, in your book, on your books,
wow.
I was like, what?
So sad,
solar calendar. Because I've just been taught that it's the lunar calendar and Rosh Kodesh, that Kodesh meant, the new moon, but it's not that. And I'm like, Oh my goodness, I have been so off on the true calendar. So explain the solar calendar.
Yeah, definitely. So the Essenes had, so there were basically two calendars that were being used during the time of Christ. There was the calendar that the Essenes were using, and then there was the calendar that the Pharisees were using. And when Antiochus, when that whole thing happened, that was part of the deal that I mentioned earlier. Antiochus
JD, good to see you, mate.
the Jewish people, the Jewish leadership, to accept his Seleucid calendar. And it's interesting.
Going well, brother.
When you look at the lunar calendar of the Pharisees that they had, and you compare it to the ancient Seleucid calendar that Antiochus would have had, they're identical. And so the Jewish people that would become the Essenes, that would become to know the Essenes, at the time they said no to that, and they wanted to keep their calendar because and what's really interesting is in the book of Jubilees, which was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, there was a prophecy about this, where God even said, there's going to be a time where, I gave you the solar calendar, and there's going to be a time you're going to abandon that.
Okay, JD, Steve Chicalan, he says the white horse was the coronavirus, the bow and the crown. So he says the white horse is rode already, and we're on the red horse now. And he says they have a 3.5 year lifespan. I don't know how accurate he is, but I do believe the horses are running.
For a lunar calendar. And God was saying he was against that. And that ended up happening. Well, at least the Pharisees and Sadducees, they made.
I retired when I got out the army when I was like 24.
That deal that the Essenes didn't. So the whole idea of the calendar, the Essenes believed that God gave Adam a solar calendar. And not only is it a yearly calendar, but it's also a calendar that describes all 6,000 years of human history and the 1,000-year Sabbath. So according to the Essenes, there would be 7,000 years of this current creation before a new heavens and new earth. And we know that from the book of Revelation and stuff, that they were talking about that well before Revelation was ever written, before John was even born. And
I spent many years in Her Majesty's Hotel, so you can't really count that as retiring, though.
So the way that their calendar worked, it was based on the sun, and the reason that they said it was so important for them to keep their original calendar is because they knew that if they did the feast days wrong, if they did the festivals wrong, especially if they did it on the wrong day, a priest could get killed for that. We see examples of that in the Old Testament where priests don't handle the festivals exactly correctly, and they end up dropping dead because of it. And it was really important. And the way that it seems taught is that the reason that's the case, the reason it's so important is because the earthly temple is a shadow of the heavenly temple. So while certain rituals are being performed in the earthly temple, at the same time, angels are performing certain rituals in the heavenly temple. And we actually see examples of this in the Bible, such as Revelation 8, when the angel has the censer of incense and stuff. Well, when you look at the details of that, that's the Day of Atonement ceremony. Now that's the heavenly one. They're not, in the heavenly temple, angels aren't sacrificed.
Yep, communism. Next horse will be communism. And look, they reckon America's on the brink of a communist war now with what Kamala Harris and that are doing.
Animals or anything like that. We're not given a whole lot of detail about what the angels are doing, but we
not yet, mate. But I got it in the fridge, getting cold.
People are sacrificing and praying and doing all this stuff while the angels are performing their heavenly duties as well, and those are supposed to happen at the same time, which is interesting too, because that means, according to the Essenes, time runs the same in heaven as it does earth. Which actually makes a lot of sense. But so they wanted to keep the rituals and the festival days exactly on the days that they were supposed to. So they kept the solar calendar and eventually moved to Qumran, and they kept doing their stuff there. So there's a lot of prophecy that can be found in that calendar, not just the year calendar, but just the idea of how they split up this long 7,000 year period. And it's interesting too, because we can go back to the ancient church fathers, and they taught as well, because they got this from the Essenes, The Essenes took the Great Commission and went and made disciples, and some of those disciples are what we would call the early church fathers. And a lot of them talk about how there's going to be 6,000 years of human history and then 1,000-year Sabbath, just like there's 6 days of a week and there's a Sabbath after that on the seventh day. And then after that, everything would be recreated. There would be a new heavens and new earth. So the church fathers got that from the Essenes. Well, they also split up this time period into certain segments. So the way that we have, years and centuries and millennia, they had Shemitahs, which was a 7-year period. Then they had Jubilees, which was a 50-year period.
Hey, Shawnee, good to see you.
Onas, which is a 500-year period, and then they had Ages, which is a 2,000-year period. And in their view, there would be it's four. They would call it 4 ages, but it's basically like 3.5. So there would be from the time of creation till the call of Abraham. That's the first age. It's the first 2,000 years, and that's called either the age of creation or the age.
Okay, Shawnee, have a good night.
And the second one, the age of Torah, started at the call of Abraham and went until 75 AD. So just a few years right after the temple was destroyed. And then according to the Essenes, the last age would be from 75, or the church age. The last age would be the millennial age, but the church age, they actually called it the age of grace, which is amazing that they even called it that in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Again, 200 years before Christ was born. But they said that would last from 75 AD to 2075 AD. Now, what's really interesting about that doesn't necessarily mean, if the Essenes are right, that we have to wait until 2075 for Christ to return. That's not exactly what that means. So while these time periods, you can basically set these time periods in stone, you can't really set the events that occur in stone. So for example, the final Jubilee, the final 50 years of the Age of Torah was between 25 AD and 75 AD. Well, think about Jesus' ministry. That was really early on. That would have been from 29, somewhere around 29 AD to 32 AD. It would have been somewhere around there. Would have been the ministry of Christ. Well, that is really early on in that final Jubilee of the Torah age. The Torah age didn't end until 75 AD, and it's not that a certain event happened in 75 AD that caused anything. It was just that was the time where the next age was to begin. So a lot of prophecies had to be fulfilled in that time. Well, and you see this at the end of each age too. You see like the final Jubilee, there's a lot of chaotic stuff and a lot of miracles. So the end of the age of creation was the whole Tower of Babylon.
Yeah, fucking grey. I'm nearly 60.
The end of the age of Torah was the first coming of Christ and everything, and a lot of those prophecies were wrapped up well before the age of grace technically started. So we could see that again in our time. We could see we're going to be hitting 2025. Technically, because the calendars are a little, the Essene calendar is different from our Gregorian calendar. Technically, the beginning of the final Jubilee of our age would be early to mid-March of 2026, technically. But suffice to say, I make a note of that in the book, and then I say, it's just really a lot easier to say like 2025 because that is like where everything's wrapping up, because 2025 to 2075. But we could see a similar thing that we saw in the Age of Torah. We could have all of these prophecies, including the tribulation and everything. We could have that happen early in our final Jubilee. I mean, that could happen next year. That could happen in a few years from now. We don't have to wait all the way till 2075. Now, Jesus could do that. He could decide that he's going to wait till 2075. But all it means is that by the year 2075, 2076, everything should be in place for us to start the millennial age, to start for Christ to start his millennial age. And think about all of the things that need to be fulfilled. It's not just we have a 7-year tribulation, Jesus returns, and then that's it. There's still a lot of things. When you read the end of the book of Ezekiel, there's a brand new temple and a brand new city. How long is it going to take for that to be built? Well, the temple of Herod took about 40 years. And I don't think that Jesus is just going to come down and, again, just snap his fingers and a temple and city are going to appear. I think that's going to need to be built. And so if that takes 40 years, well, you subtract that from, or 40 or 50 years, you subtract that from 2075, and you end up really early in our final Jubilee where Jesus would return. So a lot of times when I talk about this, especially on my channel and other interviews and things, when I give that 2075 date, a lot of people get deflated because they're like, oh, no, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to survive to 2075. And I say, look, it's okay. Like, Jesus could come back. Like, a lot of things can happen earlier on. And you can have, all the judgments of Jesus that gets performed when he returns. You can have all that stuff, and then you can still have decades where things need to get set up. How long does it take to notify the whole world of how things are now? Jesus is reigning, and emissaries from nations are expected to come to tabernacles, and and people have to get the swords and the plowshares. Like, how long does it take to get the whole world up on these new rules? It's not going to be overnight. And then again, especially with the new temple and the new city, and I take that totally literally in Ezekiel. That stuff takes time. So I believe it's very likely that we will have like the tribulation and all this stuff. And I'm not going to set a date to it, but I would expect that it would probably happen pretty early on in our final Jubilee, which would be from 2025 to 2075. I don't know exactly what year or anything, but probably pretty early on. Then when Jesus returns, take some time to clean. It's going to take some time for people to clean up the earth. It's going to take some time for all of there's like 4 different judgments that happen at that time. It's going to take some time to build all this stuff and basically get the world ready for the millennial reign, so that by 2075, by that year, everything will be done. Everything will be set in place for the millennial reign of Christ. So to me, that's really exciting. We're living in prophetic and very exciting times.
Absolutely, yeah. When I first, saw the end of the age being at 75, yes, I was one of those people too that went, oh no, with everything that's going on, oh my goodness. And then I would be 1,000 years old by then. So anyway, but when I saw the pattern of what you were talking about, like at the end of the second age, the age of Torah, that Jesus, he died and was resurrected towards the beginning of that Jubilee. Which was, so it wasn't at, if it was at 75 that happened, then I'd be like, look at that pattern. But it was the beginning of that, and then I went, it was like, okay, great. Now,
Diane, that's just macabre. That's terrible. They've invented something like that.
I've got to ask you, Josh. Some people are going to say, oh, I really want to get on that calendar. I want to know where I'm at. So. But where could they see that so they could know, okay, we're to this day as far as the Gregorian, but where am I on the solar calendar? So
yeah. So my very good friend Dr. Ken Johnson has developed a free website. It's called dsscalendar.org, and you can go to dsscalendar.org, and you can look up any date that you'd like, and you'll get the Gregorian date. So you'll get our date, but then underneath it, you'll also, or right on top of it, like you'll also see the Dead Sea Scroll calendar and what things happen on that date. So you could, if something major happens in Israel, you can go to that website and look at that date and see if it falls on a festival day or something like that. Also, we have a print version of that, which a lot of people prefer the print version because they can just look at their wall and do it. But we have a wall calendar available, and you can find a link to that at either my website, dailyrenegade.com, I have it right on the homepage, or Ken Johnson's website, biblefacts.org, and I think it's in the store. But if you scroll down, if I remember right, it's right there on this page. But we have print like a wall calendar where on the top you get the normal date with our normal date, but then on the bottom you actually get to see the Dead Sea Scroll date and dates, and you can compare the two. And what's really great about that too, like when I was writing the book, I was trying to figure out a lot of stuff from Revelation, because this is the calendar that the Bible uses. When you go from anywhere from Genesis to Revelation, when you see anything that says, on the third day of the month or on this month, you can track that down with this calendar and actually see, oh, that's why they made mention of that date. It's on, the Festival of New Wine or something like that. Well, you can do that with the prophetic day counts as well. And for me, it's a lot easier, instead of clicking around on a website, it's a lot easier for me to just have the print version and then just do the counts. And what's great is with the Essene calendar, all their months are exactly 30 days. And then they had what was called a leap week to make up for that. But it makes counting really easy. So if you want to figure out when the 5 months of the locusts in Revelation might be, you can actually count that out, and you can actually figure it out. It's really interesting because we have this calendar now. We know that 5 months, it's between the days of the Day of Atonement, which I believe that's when the abomination of desolation is going to occur for a lot of reasons that I do get into in the book. But it's the 5 months between that date and then Purim, which is 5 months later. And why Purim? Well, Purim is a Jewish celebration where they'll go out on the streets and they'll celebrate, and it's from Esther, and they give gifts and stuff. Well, I remember when I was a kid, I would read Revelation and I would read about the two witnesses, and it says that when the two witnesses are killed, the Jewish people, they were out in the streets giving each other gifts, and I thought that was really weird, because like I get celebrating, according to these unrepentant people, these two witnesses would have been like terrorists to them. So I understand why they would want to celebrate.
Battle him with his glare.
But giving gifts, like I remember when Osama bin Laden was killed, and yeah, America celebrated that, but we didn't give each other gifts. It's just a weird thing. Well, and that always stuck with me. And then when I learned about what Purim was, it was like, oh, it makes sense. That happens on Purim. So you can actually track this down with this calendar and say, like, okay, the abomination happened on the Day of Atonement, and it has to, because the ceremony that's involved, that's happening, and even in the heavenly temple in Revelation 8, that's all Day of Atonement rituals. And so the abomination of desolation happens on the Day of Atonement. Right after that, right when that happens, the locusts are released. There's like an asteroid and locusts are released. I believe those first few trumpets are pretty consecutive, like within probably a 2 or 3 day period. And they're allowed to torture unsaved people for 5 months. Well, then you get everything with the witnesses, and when you do because we know that the witnesses, their ministry lasts for I think it's 1,260 days. I have it in the book. So you can actually pinpoint right when their ministry starts, and it's in the beginning of the tribulation. There's a big debate on that in Christianity. Do the two witnesses start their ministry at the beginning of the tribulation or the second half of the tribulation? It has to be the first half, because if it's the first half, everything lines up. If it's a first half with a leap week, all of those day counts line up perfectly. But if it's in the second half, it doesn't match up with the calendar at all. So those are just like a couple of small examples on how you can use this calendar, and not only for prophetic things, but for historic things too. You can map out exactly when the flood of Noah happened. You can map out like Moses' ministry on the mountain and when all that happened. And I do that in the book. So having a print version of this calendar is really helpful, because you can take that right along with your Bible, because it's the same calendar that the Bible uses. And anytime that there's a date given, or so-and-so days of whatever month, you can look that up and you can see exactly what it is, and you can even map out prophecy that way. So yeah, again, the calendars are available at dailyrenegade.com or biblefacts.org. And if you just want the website, the free version, it's dsscalendar.org.
We're going to get into more of the Dead Sea Scrolls and how it, another way in the Dead Sea Scrolls points to around 2025, which is crazy. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to my channel, put a like on it, and also share the video. Josh, your information is so very interesting. Now, as far as the calendar, before we go on to the another way of measuring time, with the solar calendar, like, okay, if we think that Rosh Hashanah is in September, how far off is it?
Yeah, a lot of those festival and feast days are different on the Essene calendar. But I will say though, because a lot of people, what I don't want people to think is, oh, what calendar should we be following? Because that's not exactly right. This was something for Israel. Now we can look at these calendars and see if anything prophetic happens on certain days. But there were dates on the Pharisee calendar as well, the lunar calendar, where Jesus did fulfill them on those dates. And the way that I look at it is, Jesus will meet you where you are. And I think that that's what he was doing. So we do see fulfillments definitely on the Essene calendar for sure, by and large, but Jesus even took time to fulfill some of what was expected on the Pharisee calendar as well. So yeah, there are feast days that are totally and wildly different on the Essene calendar, but then again, according to the Essene interpretation, they believe they had the correct days, where when they did these rituals, they did these festivals, these feast days, that those were the exact same days that the angels were performing their duties in the heavenly temple for that day too. So the way that I look at it for us today, it's like, well, the vast majority of us, not all of us, but the vast majority of us are Gentile believers. So we're not beholden to, we're not required to follow any calendar really. But I look at it more as a point of study. It's really interesting. You can find prophetic things in there that might lend some clues as to what's coming, what's ahead, what to look for prophetically.
Good night, Phil. God bless, mate.
You can find that on the modern Jewish calendar as well, because, like I said, again, even during Jesus' ministry, he fulfilled things on both calendars. More so on the
Hey, Talia, good to see you.
On both. So I don't have any problem with somebody who wants to look at the modern Jewish calendar and try to figure out if something's happening there. Very, very well could be. So I say check out both calendars. I think they're both interesting, and also look historically at what things have been fulfilled on each of these calendars, and just compare the two. And so yeah, I encourage people to do that.
Okay, now I'd like you to explain with the Book of Enoch another way of measuring time. I found this absolutely fascinating with the 10 700-year periods. Yeah, can you explain?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this is really interesting. So in the Book of Enoch, it's chapters, I believe, I have it in the book, I think it's like 93 and 96 or something like that. I have it in the book and I lay it all out. But Enoch, he's got a different way of splitting up these time periods. Now, he would have still adhered to the solar calendar. This is more of a prophetic way of dividing up the same amount of time. So it doesn't conflict with the solar calendar. They went by the solar calendar. They didn't necessarily go by this calendar. It's not even really a calendar. It's what Enoch was doing was splitting up the times a little different into 700-year periods, where essentially every day is 100 years in this 7,000 year time period. So he split the 7,000-year time period into 10 different sections of 700 years, and he gave a prophecy for each of those, for all 10. And again, the latest that people can say that this was written, the absolute latest, would have been around 200 BC. It couldn't have been written any later than that. So I think actually Enoch's a lot older than that. What we have are copies, but let's just say that 200 BC date is accurate. That's the latest that Enoch could have been written, including this prophecy. So you can get up to about the 5th or 6th week, and you could say, well, of course, that's all history to somebody who's living in 200 BC. But then after that, you can't really say that anymore. I mean, in the prophecies, I mean, you have the Protestant Reformation described in there. Obviously, you have the Great Commission, people becoming Christians. But what's really interesting about it is where we are in that time. So we would be in the 9th week, and he calls these sections weeks because they're 700-year periods, where every day is 100 years. We right now are in the 9th week out of 10, and we are
Whose channel, Talia?
smack dab in the middle of it. 20.
Oh, this one, Jane DeVow. Yeah, she doesn't copyright. I thought she does. I've learned a little trick on what comes up if it's copyrighted or not. It can be copyrighted, but still be allowed to be shown on YouTube. So I'm much better at this now. But yeah, she doesn't copyright.
25 is the exact middle of the 9th week. And what the prophecy says about the 9th week, it says that this is the time where the judgment of the angels is going to happen, where the vanquishment of evil is going to happen, basically the return of the Messiah. That's what this week is known for. So, you know, when we, and then the 10th week is all about the millennium and stuff, because by the time the 10th week starts, the world is over.
Talia, how I check if they're copyrighted, I play stuff that I know is not copyrighted, then I'll put a copyright channel video in there. And if it comes up copyright and I can't share it, I know that channel I can't use anymore, but the other channels are safe because I know they're safe already. So that's how I test it. And if it is copyrighted, I just delete it.
About 300 years into the millennium. So it's all about that. But so, you know, we might ask, well, why would we look at the middle point of that week? This whole prophecy has a certain structure to it that's called chiastic. It has a chiastic structure, meaning it's like a palindrome. So the first week and the 10th week relate to each other in some way. They're structured similarly. And so in the first week, it talks about in the 7th part of that week, this and this is going to happen. And then in the 10th week, it also talks about the 7th part. You don't see that in any of the other ones. Now, in week 2, it says something, it refers to something about in the middle of that week in 2. Well, with this chiastic structure, the pair of week 2 would be week 9. That would be us. So that's why we look at the middle part there and we would say, okay, somewhere around the middle, we should expect this to happen. And it's not an exact, I mean, 2025 is the exact like date. That's the middle of this week, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those events are going to happen on exactly 2025. It's just somewhere around the middle. Like the in the second week, it talks about the flood and it talks about Noah, and his birth was 6 years off from the exact middle point, but it's still generally the middle. So that's why we can't be too exact when it comes to like exact dates. It's more generally around that time. So generally somewhere around the time of the middle of the 9th week, we should see the tribulation, we should see the return of the Messiah, we should see the judgment of the angels, all of that stuff. And so we're right there. We're a few years, according, if this is right, we're a few years away from that. And then you have the rest of the weeks in the middle. They don't give any kind of like time signature for what part of the week to look at. They're just general. In this week, this and this happens. But to me, the most fascinating part of that prophecy is seeing that again, that date, 2025, 2026, that comes up again, even in this other prophetic time count that Enoch writes about, and it points again to really the time period that we're living in now. So I would expect something significant in the next 2-3 years. We should start seeing some more prophecies being fulfilled. We're already seeing that. I mean, we've been seeing that since Israel became a nation again. So in a way, that's nothing new, but that should increase, but also miracles and things like that. We should see an increase in that too. Also, unfortunately, a big increase in apostasy, because that was another big mark of the last jubilee of an age. Is there's massive apostasy. We clearly saw that at the end of the age of Torah with the Pharisees and everything. I mean, they killed Jesus, so that's obviously there's an apostasy happening there. But also at the end of the age of creation with the Tower of Babel, that's an apostasy. So, and then when you look at the world today, we live in a world here in 2024, 2025, in our time today, we live in a time that I think sometimes we take for granted how weird it is, how weird it is that the world works the way it does. The world has never worked like this before with all this technology and everything that we have now. We take it for granted because we're born into it. But think about it, it really was not that long ago that we were in horse and buggies. And now we're shooting rockets, into space, and we have orbiting satellites, and everybody's connected through the internet, and it's just a completely unprecedented time. And when you think about it, there's no reason that it had to be our time where that could have happened. The Greeks could have done that. They had the same math, they had the same materials, raw materials. They had the same intelligence. They could have created an automobile. They could have had an industrial revolution. There's no reason why they couldn't have had that. But I think something was restraining that, and I think that restrainer, I think the veil is kind of thinning now, and it's allowing a lot more of these things to happen. Another thing from the book of Enoch, we read that when the 200 watchers fell, they essentially gave a type of technology to mankind that they didn't have, and it was through war and things, cutting of roots, astrology. But they didn't have access to that before, and they gave them that. So that makes me wonder if the veil is thinning, if the restrainer is loosening, however we want to define that. Is it easier for fallen angels to provide mankind with, maybe not like swords and cutting of roots like it was before, but now, microchips and technology and the internet. And I'm not, my daughter came in to say hi. Hey, okay, I'm doing an interview, sweetheart. I love you. Go see Mama. Sorry about that. It's totally fine if you wanted to leave that in there.
It's totally
she does
fine.
she does that in a lot of my videos. But anyway, yeah, she's adorable. She's my whole heart. But so just thinking about, like, is it possible that we've now in this time, where it absolutely could have been possible to do this before, but now in this time, because we're getting so late into our church age, into our age of grace, is that veil thinning? Is that restrainer loosening? And does that allow evil agents to bestow upon us technology that we might not have been able to create on our own when the veil was more in full effect? And I think that's very likely, because how else do we explain just how weird and different, and how much it changes year by year? I mean, I was born in the 80s, and even that was pretty technological compared to the rest of the world. But it's a totally different world today than when it was. I didn't have the internet.
Talia, I think 2030, I think that's when he comes back. I think that's it. I agree with all these guys saying that. From what I can see, I think they're pretty accurate.
When I grew up, we didn't have tablets. Cell phones weren't a thing. Cordless phones were just starting to become a thing, but everybody still had a landline. And today, I didn't have a computer. I had a typewriter. But today, it's after 40 short years later, it's a totally different world, and it's getting so advanced I can't even keep up with it. Like my kids are able to. My 5-year-old is able to, like, do stuff on her tablet, and it's like, how did you even learn how to do that? Like, how did you learn how to find that app? And we're careful with it. There's all sorts of protections and stuff, and she just has like kids teaching apps and stuff. But she's able to log in. She's able to put her passcode in. Like, it's like I never would have been able to figure that out when I was 5 years old in 1989. So it's just crazy to think about. So I think that it's very telling. Why this year, 2025, 2026, why this time period that we're living in keeps coming up in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I think it's incredibly prophetic, and I think we're about to see a lot of crazy stuff, both good and bad, in our near future.
Well, Vas, you got to admit, it looks like the Pope is the false prophet. You seen him the other day saying all them faiths, that they all are on the same path to God. So we know definitely the false prophet's in. And I still throw my hat in the ring for King Charles. As it stands, I think he's the most logical contender.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think it's interesting that the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947, a year before Israel became a nation, which, that Israel becoming a nation is just a key to Bible prophecy. And also back to those weeks, when you were talking about like week 2, that coincides with week 9, which we are in week 9. And again, that in week 2, because you talk about each thing in your books of the weeks and what happened. And it's like prophetically, I mean, when you look at week 7 and week 8, you're just going to have to get the books to see what happened. But it's like, oh my goodness, yes, that happened in history. So but it was written before that. And so, but week 2, which you said coincides with week 9, is Noah's flood, the events leading to Noah's flood, and the great wickedness caused by fallen angels mating with human women. But Jesus said, just like in the days of Noah. So
That's right.
Right.
Really
so
good point.
Yeah, so it's like really, really crazy because it's coinciding with week 9, and like you said, the fallen angels and technology, which of course, the whole Roswell thing started. We started seeing, more evidence of the fallen angels, with the
Yes.
what they call UFOs.
And I've wondered that too, talking about the technology, is it possible these, and I know this is a little off of left field, but I've written about this as well, these spaceship crashes, is that just fallen angels giving us technology? Because when you look at that, it was about that time that we started seeing a lot of advancements in technology, far surpassing anything that came before. And so I wonder, are these crashes deliberate? Is this actually fallen angel technology, and they're basically just throwing them down to earth to give us this stuff so we'll use it really to our own destruction? And I think that's very likely.
Okay, we probably could talk forever on this. Yeah, I mean, like I just feel like World War II and then Hitler. I mean, I think that he was in contact with these fallen angels, and
Yes.
I actually believe that the Nazi scientists had technology from the fallen angels because it was just and then when they came over to the United States, what is that Operation
Paperclip.
Paperclip? Yep.
Yep.
So it's like, wait a minute, how did you even know how?
Nah, so I'll do a Super Soldier video stream tomorrow because I like Super Soldier.
To do that kind of stuff, and it was very, very evil, which you would expect from the fallen angels. So it's like, okay, yeah, no, like you said, it just started really advancing. All of this technology kept on advancing and advancing. So it really shows the time that we're living in, but then it shows that Jesus is coming back soon.
Amen. I totally agree, and that's basically the crux of the whole 2-volume set, is showing that even if we're wrong about the calendar, even if we're wrong about these dates, because I don't set a date in the book. I don't actually at the last part of the book. I tell people, if I were a betting man, I would say 2025 is going to come and go and nothing's going to happen, because every time somebody tries to predict something, it doesn't happen. So I don't predict anything in the Bible or in the book from the Bible. I don't predict any specific date. And I tell people, don't sell your house, don't max out your credit cards, don't make any big life changes. But the main thing is, even though we don't know the day or the hour, we don't even know the year, we can kind of gauge the season, I think. And that's a broad general term. It doesn't mean any particular amount of time, but we can just kind of gauge the season that we're in. And so the main message of the book is that even though we don't know exactly when, Jesus is coming back soon, very soon. Just look at the season that we're in and what's happening. We can't pinpoint the exact day, but Jesus is coming soon. So now is the time, if you haven't already, to get right with Christ. Now is the time to accept Jesus as your Savior, if you haven't already. Now is the time to start praying. If you're saved and you just don't pray, and you just Christianity isn't a part of your life, but you're technically saved because you believe in Jesus, well, now's the time to really start living for Jesus and start dedicating your life to him. Just going to heaven, that's great, but that's not enough. The Bible teaches that there are going to be people who
Diane posted a bit further back.
Who go to heaven and they have no rewards. They have no status.
Unbelievable, they're building them sort of things. Who even comes up and builds one of them? What company is behind the manufacturing of them end-of-life pod things? You can't say the actual word because you get banned. But yeah, who's behind that? They're going to be in a lot of trouble when they front God because they're committing murder.
Yes. You have powerful leaders who are rich in this world who, they may be saved, they may have gotten saved, but they're not living for Christ. They're living for themselves. Well, Jesus said that basically the greatest on earth, they're going to be the least in heaven. Somebody who's living a life just on their own, without Christ, even if they technically believe in Jesus and they've accepted that gift of salvation, well, when they get to heaven, they're not going to have any rewards, and they're going to be least in the kingdom of heaven. So, and we know we all need to think like that too. Like, am I every day? Am I living for Christ, or am I living for myself? Every decision we make, we should be thinking that, and especially because given in light of all these prophecies, not only in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but just in the Bible as well. And we take that for Holy Scripture. I don't take the Dead Sea Scrolls as the inspired word of God for our time or anything. And I get into all that in the book. It's really great history, accurate prophecy. But if people are turned off to the idea of the Dead Sea Scrolls, we'll just look at your Bible. That is the holy word of God, and that tells us the time that we're living in, that the time is getting short. So yeah, now is the time to be dedicated to Christ more than any other time, because again, Jesus is coming soon.
Absolutely, and Jesus said that we should not be ignorant of the times and the seasons.
That's right.
So Josh, thank you so much. Can you tell people where they can get the two book series, two books, and your website?
Absolutely. So the 2-volume set, it's called Forgotten Prophecies of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the absolute best place to get it is
Okay, I'm making today's show about 2025. So hang on. That's what I wanted to do. There's the other one there.
Well, there, up in the sky, is this, and about the engineering for a 1,500-mile structure is off the charts. They have technology. We know that.
What does the Bible say about supernatural technology? Have fallen angels secretly contributed to our technological advancements? Why does Daniel 12:4 say to seal up the words until the end? Ellie Marzulli, you understand the end time prophecies as in the days of Noah, the great coming deception, strong delusion better than anyone I know. And as you are an author and researcher, and you've done award-winning documentaries regarding the UFO phenomena, what in the world is going on?
Well, this dates back decades. For those of us who are ufologists or have been following this, I saw my first UFO when I was 12. I was at Boy Scout camp. I was number 4 in a group of 4 boys who were hopping rocks up this ravine. Beautiful sunny day. I'm the last kid, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm number 4. So number 1 kid goes, "Wow, what's that?" And he points over to his right. The other 2 guys goes, "Wow, what is that?" And I go, "Where?" They go, "There, up in the sky is this, and about this big, about like that." Yeah, that's about it, just like that.
So you saw that?
Oh yeah, and it hovered like this for maybe 20 seconds, and then I'll bring it down here. It left the scene like this, just like that, gone, straight up and gone. Classic UFO. We run as fast as we can back to scout camp. We get there. We saw a UFO. We saw a flying saucer.
Diane, we're out of time. We got months left at the most before the shit hits the fan. We are really out of time.
All the kids come out. The scoutmasters come out. I can see it like it was yesterday. The kids are all around us. What did it look like? It was shiny. It was metallic. We don't know. It shot off in the sky. By the evening meal, this was the lunch. By the evening meal, the other 3 boys denied that they had ever seen anything.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, and I allowed the penalty. And I was ridiculed and called all sorts of names. I would not back down on the story. It was my first lifelong lesson of herd mentality and how people will deny what they've seen in order to be part of the herd. I just wouldn't go there. So I've been immersed in this. I was raised Catholic at 13. I left the Catholic Church. I became, the Beatles were there. This is 63, 64. So it's Beatlemania. And then shortly after that, Eastern mysticism comes in. The greatest explosion of occult books since the 20s came into America. We allowed it in, along with, meditation and gurus and yoga. So the bottom line was, I read everything I get my hands on with the New Age, with the occult, with Eastern mysticism, with the burgeoning UFO phenomena. And I had many occult experiences. And so from 13 to 30, there was this window of time where I am immersed in like Carlos Castaneda smoke quests with the little smoke peyote ceremonies. I mean, I was deep. I was in the ashram. So we were. I left the guru. I had stuff happen. I became an agnostic, and at the ripe age of 30 years old, I accepted Jesus. I was alone in my room, and I was reading Dave Hunt's book, The Cult Explosion, and I said a goofy little prayer. I say goofy little prayer because it's what it was. It was just, well, you know, Jesus is really real, and nothing happened. And about 30 days later, all hell broke loose. The Lord began to pull me out of the kingdom of darkness. They did not want to let me go. And it was a battle that lasted basically 3 years. I had two mentors, one Wayne Kendall, who's gone home with the Lord. He was 20 years my senior, so he'd be 93 right now. And Wayne took me through the darkest days of my life, without doubt. And then Pastor Fred Nicholas at Calvary Chapel, Thousand Oaks. I used to see Fred twice a week in the beginning, And he told me he'd never seen anybody that was being attacked so severely. And this went on, and I was defenseless. Neither man knew anything about putting on the armor of God, walking in victory. They didn't know anything about that. So this is circa 1980. So it's a long time ago, 43 years ago.
But you know what? I think you had this attack because the Lord was giving you a revelation about the end time prophecy regarding the coming, deception. And as in the days of Noah, again, better than anyone I know. I mean, the Lord, you explained it better than anyone I know.
A long time ago.
So I think that's why you've had that attack.
And I would agree with that. I concur. I think that the enemy knows who we are before we know who we are, type of deal. And I was a musician. I'm a classically trained pianist. I composed my own music. I've worked with orchestras. I've written full-blown orchestral cantatas with choral elements. I mean, we're not just.
I'm a composer too, so.
Okay, we're not talking four chords on the piano here. We're talking, stuff that's pretty involved. But I boast. But so I was always a musician. I became a worship leader. I was a worship leader basically on and off for 25 years. I didn't understand why certain churches I wound up in were secessionists, were anti-Israel. The churches Israel were not, they were basically all millennial churches. I didn't know, why don't they talk about this stuff? Because Calvary Chapels do, and did back then and still do today. Not all of them, but many of them do. And of course, what we're seeing in Israel is unbelievable, but I digress. So after 10 years of being immersed in Bible study and being a worship leader, the Lord began to shift everything, slowly shift the ministry from worship leader to what I'm doing now. And it was like, if you had told me, 43 years ago when I came across the line, gave my heart to Jesus, that I'd be doing this, it's just like, we'd have probably run out of the room screaming, no! Because it's not for the faint of heart. But because I was immersed in the New Age, and I've been on both sides of the aisle, so I really enjoy, in some ways, a unique perspective. So having been immersed in the UFO phenomena before I became a Christian.
Okay, and just so, because some people are going to say UFO, okay, wait, he believes in UFOs, so can, what are those?
Okay, let's cut to the chase. But when we get into 2 Kings, okay, and we have Elisha and Gehazi, Elisha's servant, and Elijah is totally freaked out because the entire Syrian army, or Gehazi's freaked out because the entire Syrian army has encamped against Elisha. And so now what? And Elisha says, Lord, open my servant's eyes. So he shoos Gehazi out of the tent. Gehazi goes out there, and the Lord opens his eyes. And
here on the Sunshine Coast, you find the sunshines from above and from within.
It's run out time on the D90 Executive 4-wheel drive diesel. With 7 seats, get the large LDV D90.
And he comes running back and he goes, oh my gosh, I saw the chariots of fire above the Syrian army. So whatever chariots of fire. You remember, Gehazi is looking at this through human eyes, that in his vernacular, there's nothing to describe this. So Gehazi knows what a chariot is. It's a vehicle. So it's a chariot, and he knows fire. That's it. So a chariot of fire. Today, we would call that a UFO. So there seems to be, and people go immediately, they go, why do angels need chariots of fire? And you get this because the church has this incredibly truncated view of the supernatural. So the good guys and the bad guys can use these vehicles. We know from the Indian, not Native American Indian, the Indian legends about the Vimanas. And we know that there was war between these flying discs. We know that. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Gary Stearman had an encounter. We interviewed him in our Watcher series. It was basically he had 3 hours of missing time.
Yeah.
And he was not abducted. He was not taken. This thing was the most beautiful thing he's ever seen.
Tell you, that's what I mean. He's got to be the false prophet. No world leaders for Christianity has ever denied Christ like he has. He's got to be the false prophet. There's no other alternative. Who else could be worse?
Pastor Matt Freeman, who recently prayed to the Lord, I want to see one of the good guys. And the Lord answered him. And as he was coming in for a landing on a jet plane, this thing flew by under the wing like this. Right under the wing like that. So, and immediately,
Good guys.
I know. Yeah, hold on. I know where you're going with this, okay?
Yeah.
Because the church has a truncated view of the supernatural. We say we believe in the Bible, but when it really comes down to it, most Christians have a truncated view.
Diane, no Christian would be caught dead in that building for Christians. They got a building for Jews, a building for Muslims, and a building for us. No genuine Christian would enter that building at all.
Of the supernatural. What do angels need this for? You know, why can't God just snap his fingers and do this? Why is it that the angels fight with the devil and his angels? I call it the Great Eviction Notice in the book of Revelation. How do they fight? How do they kick Satan and his angels out of the second heaven? Because that's where they are. They fight. There's weaponry. Who makes the weapons? Do they just go sword and the sword appears? You know, when the cherubim are in the gates, this is the book I'm working on. This will be number 15. Supernatural technology in the Bible. So I'm throwing you some stuff. So the cherubim are on the east gate, okay? But only on the east gate, which immediately begs the question, what happens to the north, south, and the west gates? Why doesn't the Lord have to guard those gates? Are they tucked away? Are they closed? He doesn't have to touch them, but the east gate is open. For some reason, the east gate is open. So he's got cherubim sitting there, and then guess what he's got? He's got a flaming sword that goes every which way. Vroom, 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 vroom. That is technology. What is that flaming sword which turns every which way? It's not the cherubim, it's a flaming sword. When Joshua meets the angel of the Lord, which is none other than the pre-incarnate Christ,
and guys, don't forget that giant in Afghanistan that the American army killed. He had a spear as well. So somewhere in the depths of them caves, there's a smelting thing where they can smelt steel spearheads. And it was something like 3 foot long. So they've got technology underground that can turn rock into steel. Absolutely crazy.
Angel of the Lord, this is another chapter of the book, has his sword drawn. So is it possible? I kind of did this tongue-in-cheek in the book. I've already written about 6 chapters. And then the Lord switched and said, "Don't. This is the book you need to get out, The Rungs of Disclosure Ladder." So I'm working on this thing every day. So the angel of the Lord, which is the pre-incarnate Christ, has his sword drawn. Well, where did that sword come from? Who made that sword? Did they have, and I guess this is tongue in cheek, did they have a contest in heaven among the metallurgists, among the smiths? Who will make the Lord's sword? Well, I'll make the Lord's sword. No, I will. No, I will. No, I will. We'll have a contest to see who will do it. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened, but I'm throwing that out to state that we know in the book of Enoch, when the fallen watchers come down, they have technology. We know that. They show mankind the art of weapon making. That's in the book of Enoch. The watchers are showing this. So they know about metallurgy. Who constructs the New Jerusalem? How does that work? 1,500 miles wide, 1,500 miles long, 1,500 miles in height. Is it a cube? Is it a pyramid? We don't know. I lean towards pyramid. Some people go, oh, blasphemy. Why is that blasphemy? You don't know what it is, and I don't know what it is. If you think it's a cube, that's fine. But 1,500 miles, the engineering for that is, Jane, the engineering for a 1,500 mile structure is off the charts. Off the charts, okay? And this thing descends. It doesn't just go poof on the planet, okay? So somehow it's got anti-gravity properties to it. We don't know what those anti-gravities, well, the angels are holding it up in a way. Well, that's possible. Or does it have some sort of technology that's built in that enables this thing to fly around? I don't know. But you see what I mean by truncated view? We travel in this stuff, but we always lean towards, well, God can just snap his fingers and, okay, I get that. And God can do that. What about the angels in the book of Ezekiel that come into Jerusalem with slaughter weapons? And another angel has got the magic inkhorn, putting a little mark on somebody's forehead. Don't touch them. And the angels with the slaughter weapons go out and do what they're going to do. I mean, it's all throughout the biblical narrative once we start looking for the technology that's there. So there seems to be stuff that's used. I mean, in Ezekiel chapter 1, Gary Stearman calls it, God's taking his 57 Chevy out for a spin. I mean, that's a vehicle of some sort. The living creatures are there. God's throne is there, and he's just going for a joyride for Ezekiel. I mean, what the heck is that? I mean, it is some sort of a craft. Is it a UFO as we know it? No, it's not. It's something else. But the problem with the church is we've got this truncated view of the supernatural, where I just gave you a bunch of examples. Something is going on. So we need to at least come to a point where, okay, I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. The Bible has some of the answers, but in other places it's closed off. So what we do know is this, that the sightings that you just said, in my opinion, I would lean that 99% of those are the bad guys. That's what we're looking at.
Okay, but before you go on, I want to go back to the technology. Do you believe that some technology that we have today is from the fallen angels giving that
100%.
technology to people, and even some people who are involved in the occult?
Yes, absolutely, all day long.
All
day long.
What kind of technology would you say has been?
Well, Philip Corso has a book. It came out in the 90s, and Corso was greeted with a lot of skepticism. It certainly is a deathbed confession. He died shortly after the book was published. When I say shortly, within a year or something like that. I'd have to go back and look and see exactly when the book was published. Corso's dead, but Corso spilled the beans. A lot of people go, well, I don't believe in Corso's book. But then we have Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar worked at S4, which is part of Area 51. In the 90s, Lazar became a whistleblower and basically stated on the record that he worked at S4. He was back engineering the propulsion system from a UFO. Fast forward to David Grush, whistleblower in Congress, talking about the UFO crash retrieval program. Go back to 1947, Roswell, New Mexico. This is what number 7 and number 8 in our UFO film series is all about. This was not a weather balloon. There's no doubt in my mind. This was a crash disk that happened in what is now known as a debris field We are, as far as I know, the only Christian research team that actually has spent time to go to a debris field with metal detectors to see what we could find. Guess what?
Yeah, they found something.
We found debris buried about 6 inches below the ground. We had the debris tested. It's metal that the closest thing we have to it is an aluminum alloy not created till 1972. What's that doing there? And
Okay.
this will be in our film number 8 in the series. We actually show it on camera. We are digging this, the metal detector goes off. We run over with the cameras. We dig this thing up. There it is.
Wow.
It's right in his hand. And then we have that metal tested. And once again, it's the closest thing. It's not a match. It's an aluminum alloy from 1972. And in the film, I show what happens. There's a clip from Holloman Air Force Base, which happened, who knows? No, White Sands. I'm sorry, White Sands. You see this gleaming UFO come down. It hits the ground. It goes back up. It goes like this again. It comes back down. But when it hits the ground the second time, Janie, it explodes in a gazillion pieces. It just shatters like this. So these pieces came down at a high velocity. They just didn't gently fall like snowflakes on the ground in New Mexico. They came down very fast and buried themselves in the ground. They didn't get it all. And we found that day, we found 2 pieces of the metal. Why is the balloons going up? This is what I have no idea. Something is set on my computer, and I have no idea.
I was like, oh my goodness, okay.
I have no idea why it's doing this.
But let me just say this to you. Okay, with the fall, because we know this technology is from the fallen angels, and we know that, I mean, like, let me just say, like the internet, because we know the bottom line is they want to end up controlling all of us. So do you think even the internet and all that technology was given, to be the final end of being able to control us?
I think it's all interconnected, yes, in some ways. It's all interconnected.
Right, okay.
Right now the internet is benevolent on some level, but it is controlled. We no longer have free speech. You can't say certain things. Now it's like hate thought. If you have a thought, you can be arrested. I mean, we live in a police state. I mean, we do in America, unfortunately.
What I find interesting is like Hitler, he was into the occult, but he seemed to have technology that was, I think, given by fallen angels. And then right after that, we had a lot of Nazis come over, and then you start having the space program and all different stuff. Again, I think that was technology given by fallen angels. What do you think, and where do you see it finally going?
Well, Bob Lazar, once again, circling back to Bob Lazar stated in the 90s that he was back engineering the propulsion system from a crashed UFO or from a UFO that was just given to us. David Grush jumped from the 90s to present day. David Grush stated at the congressional hearing that we had a retrieval program in the United States government to retrieve these discs.
Diane, I wonder if our Kmart's linked to your Kmart. I wonder if it's the same company. Sounds like it, because otherwise they'd have trademark problems, wouldn't they?
I believe if there was a quid pro quo, you've mentioned this, that we were given these so-called extraterrestrials, which are not extraterrestrials. These are the watchers. These are the bad guys. These are the fallen angels, okay? We are warned of this. They gave technology for access to the population. So Jesus warns us to be like the days of Noah when he returns. What differentiates the days of Noah, the springboard for that, is Genesis 3:15, where Jesus in the garden, Adam and Eve have just blown it. So you got a little vignette. You got the dragon, you got the serpent over here, you got Adam and Eve over here, you have Jesus in the garden. He says to the dragon, to the serpent, your offspring, your seed will be at war, at enmity with the offspring, the seed of the woman. The one coming from the woman, the proto-evangelium, will crush your head. You, dragon, Satan, will bruise his heel. That is the gateway. That is the gateway to the rest of the biblical prophetic narrative. If we don't understand Genesis 3:15, and it's not taught in the churches for the most part, When we do get to Genesis 6, where the Nephilim are on the earth and all the consequences after that, we have no idea of what's going on. And out of the entire Tanakh, the Old Testament, remember when Jesus utters these words, it'll be like the days of Noah. There is no New Testament. That's not written for a while. So all he's pointing to is the Tanakh. And out of the entire Tanakh, he points back to the days of Noah. Why? Because that's when the seed war erupts. Fast forward from Jesus' words, which is Matthew 24, Luke 21, and Mark 13. Hop back to the Genesis 6 narrative, where the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards. Spring from there to Daniel 2:43. Prophet Daniel says, or the angel talking to the prophet Daniel says, Daniel, seal up the words in this book. Seal them up until the time of the end. People won't understand what you're talking about, Dan. They won't get it. So seal up the words until the time of the end. And then he throws us a spiritual clue. This is what the time of the end will look like. Men and women will run to and fro over the face of the earth. Knowledge will increase. As you and I are discussing this, there are thousands of planes transporting people to and fro over the face of the earth. And knowledge now increases exponentially, basically every 6 months. The book is unsealed. Now go to Daniel 2:43, very enigmatic scripture. It says, their seed, there's that nasty word again, their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to them. That sentence is so loaded, so pregnant with meaning, it's mind-boggling, it's staggering. First of all, who are they? They cannot be the seed of men. So you're looking at the mingling of the seed. When we go back to Genesis 3:15, there's the gateway to the rest of the Bible. If we have the right exegesis, the right interpretation of Genesis 3:15, when we get to Daniel 2:43, oh, I get it. Seed war manifesting when? In the last days. And when it says they will not cleave to them, it's the work of Jim Williamson, who first illuminated this for me. A man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. That's a marriage contract. Well, guess what? There's no cleaving in the Daniel thing, but they will not cleave to them. Their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not cleave to them. Who are they? Can't be men. Can't be the seed of men. So who the heck are
Good
they?
point.
These are the fallen watcher angels. This ties into our fourth film in the in our UFO series, which is on abduction, where women are taken, ovum is taken from the women. Some women find themselves pregnant. Sperm is taken from the men. It all goes back to Genesis 3:15, the mingling of the seed. If I'm wrong, I will stand up in front of the world and admit this, but I'm not wrong, because that is the correct interpretation of Genesis 3:15. Elder brother Gary Stearman taught this way back in one of our early Nephilim Mounds conferences in Ohio, and you can hear a pin drop in the room. And Gary's presentation was, it's all about seed. He is right. Genesis 3:15 is the gateway to the rest of the Bible. It really is.
I want you to explain the special offer that you're making available for my subscribers, and because I've seen the documentaries in this offer, and they are off the charts. I mean, really, they are. And the book said, "Are you making available?" And it's for a special price. But I couldn't believe the information. I mean, believers need to.
That was really funny, Diane.
To know what's going on, because again, you're explaining, as in the days of Noah, better than anyone else, and what's really happening. And unbelievers, like family, I know that you have unsaved family, and they need to see this, but then they'll see the relevance of Jesus and how this has all been prophesied. So if you could explain what's in that special offer.
Well, and your listeners, you're the only listening. Your listeners are the only audience who can get this. It's not for the general public. This is for you guys. And basically, you get the 5 DVD box set. There are 6 right now. There are 6 DVDs in our ongoing UFO collection. All right. So you get the 5 DVD box set, plus you get the cattle mutilation DVD. Then you get further evidence, which is further evidence about UFOs. This is journalism. There's also 40 pictures. That's real. That's real. And it's photojournalism. I'm actually sitting down and interviewing people about the UFO phenomenon. So it's really, in some ways, it's a primer, and then you also get our book, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year-old cover-up. So it's quite an offer, and all that's available, and you can do two things with it. You can watch everything, or you can buy two of them. Give one, invite the family, neighbors over, show all the DVDs, whatever. Sit down, pass the stuff around, get educated, and give one to your pastor. Most pastors are too busy to do anything, but they need to look at this and understand that this is the coming great deception. This is the strong delusion.
Diane, I was worried that link might have been a moonshot. You chucking a moonshot.
That we read about in 2 Thessalonians. There's no doubt in my mind, absolutely no doubt in my mind, that the UFO phenomenon combined with the Darwinian paradigm is the coming great deception, is the strong delusion.
Yeah, and actually this really explains it all better than anything.
Wow.
And also when you first had mentioned to me about cattle with the mutilation, I was like, huh? But then when you talked to me about, well, what they're doing with the blood, okay, right. You're all going to just have to get that series. And there's a special link in the description. So you have to click on that link to get the special price. So, LA, thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Want to shed your carbon footprint? For tens of carbon loss tips and tricks, join Becco's #ShedThatCarbon program.
Shalom everyone, my name is Eris Soref. I'm the president of One for Israel. I'm sure many of you have seen new...
Before the second coming of Christ.
Okay, I just wanted to load that. I'll play what the Pope said recently.
Of the Antichrist. And one of the things there are a lot of things in the culture right now that are pointing to the coming of the Antichrist. And one of the things that has just populated in the news and on social media recently is not something that you would expect. We talk about the entertainment industry and how the devil's running rampant in all these different spheres. You have things like P. Diddy being exposed for sex trafficking and being arrested, and who's going to be exposed as well on his list. And all of these things are coming together. But would you imagine that some of the most prominent, quote unquote, Christian leaders are also possibly the ones who are going to be ushering in this Antichrist spirit, this one world government, this one world currency, and this one world religion? Well, in the clip I'm about to share with you right now, this should wake you up. If you're part of the Catholic Church, you need to understand that there's a spirit behind what's going on in the Catholic Church that is not the spirit of God, but is very likely the spirit of the Antichrist. Before I jump into that clip, though, I want to share with you that this video is brought to you by 3 Nails Clothing. If you enjoy the clothing that I'm wearing in almost every single video of this 3 Nails cross, whether it's a sweatshirt or a hat or it's one of these t-shirts, 3 Nails Clothing is the premier sportswear for people who are followers of Jesus Christ, who want to rep their faith while wearing gear that is ridiculously comfortable and extremely attractive. And it's just
part of being a DJ, Vast.
It's the best sports gear out there. This is comparable to like Lululemon, Vuori. This is high-end stuff. But when you buy this stuff, not only are you able to represent your faith while you're on the go, whether you're just trying to be casual or you're working out, but with every purchase, you can actually help fight human trafficking. Yes. So I want to encourage you, go to 3nailsclothing.com. They have a whole new set of fall gear. I put a link in the description as well as the link in the comments. Use promo code CAP, K-A-P, for 10% off anything. I want you to buy a lot of gear for yourself, for your family. This stuff is really the best. Now, let's dive into this clip right here of the Pope. Listen to what he says. This is going to be, I want you to hold on tight, guy.
Hey, Bas, I'm going to do a Super Soldier show tomorrow, and I'm also going to put in that cryptid camera videos, because you see a lot of creepy cryptid creatures on that. So tomorrow's going to be a different show. Looking forward to it.
He's going to have to, he's speaking in Italian, and then you're going to hear some translation. But the weight of what he's saying is so consequential for the global church to understand. What he says in this clip is 100% heretical, blasphemous, and I believe inspired by the Antichrist. And you'll see why. Listen to what he says in this clip.
Una delle cose che più mi ha colpito di voi giovani, di questi qui, è la capacità del dialogo interreligioso.
One of the things that struck me about all of you here is your ability to engage in interreligious dialogue.
E questo è molto importante.
And this is very important.
Perché se voi incominciate a litigare, la mia religione è più importante della tua, la mia è la vera, la tua non è vera, dove ci porta questo?
Because if we start to fight amongst ourselves and saying, my religion is more important than yours, my religion is true, yours is not, where will that lead us?
Dove?
Where will it lead us?
Qualcuno risponda, dove?
Someone respond, where would it lead us? The distruzione.
Così.
So the Pope is speaking at, I think it's a multi or interfaith conference in Singapore. It's an interreligious youth conference with the people of Singapore and Pope Francis. And what did he just say? He said, if we're going to say one religion is better than any other religion, then that is going to lead to destruction. Let me know right off the bat with that comment. Are you in agreement with what he's saying? Do you think that all paths lead to heaven? Do you think that all religions are kind of on an equal playing field and we need to stop being so bigoted and we need to start being more tolerant of each other's beliefs? Let me know in the comments right now what you believe. Genuinely, let's make this a conversation. Keep it civil, but please share what you believe down below.
I wonder if the Catholic flock are lost as well, because the clergy, they're going to hell. They've got to know this is going on because we know what's going on. But I wonder about the patrons, like the normal people in the Catholic Church. Are they saved or not?
And I'll share what I believe shortly.
Yes, it's okay to discuss and to...
Tutte le religioni sono un cammino per arrivare a Dio.
Because every religion is a way to arrive at God.
Sono,
wow.
in una comparazione, sono come diverse lingue, diversi idiomi per arrivare lì.
Sort of a comparison, an example would be they're sort of like different languages in order to arrive at God.
Wow.
There's many different ways to arrive at God.
Cunning way to put it. It's just another language. What a cunning way to put it.
All these different religions are basically different languages. That's what he's saying.
Cunning.
This is extremely problematic. This is extremely unbiblical. This is extremely heretical. I'm going to show you why. And just so you know, this is not an indictment on people personally. This is no personal attack, and this is no way me saying, listen to me because my opinion is the right opinion. I'm banking on what Jesus said. I'm banking on what God's word says. It's not about my personal opinion versus your personal opinion, but the reality is what Jesus said. I'm going to show you shortly. What Jesus said is completely in contrast to what this guy is saying right here. Completely. And if this guy is a representative of a quote unquote
Christian good to see ya.
Then what he's saying is this is gonna I don't know how to say this lightly or politely, but what he's saying right now is
blasphemy.
Damnable.
Yep.
This is one of the most blasphemous things that you could say, especially as a leader of the Christian church. I'll show you why.
Ma Dio è Dio per tutti.
But God is God for all.
E come Dio è Dio per tutti, noi siamo tutti figli di Dio.
And if God is God for all, then we're all sons and daughters of God.
No.
Ma il mio Dio...
No. Yes. God is God for all, Everybody's created in the image of God. God wants relationship with all people. Yes, 100%. You see it in Genesis. God created man. He created man in his image. Amazing. John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, so that whoever believes in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. Yes, God loves all people. But are all people sons and daughters of God? No, not at all. The Bible is very clear that you and I are actually orphans spiritually. You and I are actually children of the devil before we come into relationship with God. What does that mean? Does it mean that the devil created us? No, but the devil absolutely recreated us in his own image when we were born, when we sinned, when we rebelled against God, when we said, God, we don't want to do things your way. The curse of sin separates us from God and mars the image of God that we hold, so that God can't have any part of us. And this is why it's so important that Jesus came to do what he did. I'll talk about that more shortly. Let's finish what Pope Francis has to say.
But my God is more important than your God. Is that true?
Bring it out.
C'è un solo Dio. E noi sono idiomi, cammino, lingue per arrivare.
This guy is making up his own religion, man. This is not.
That is the whore of Babylon. That is literally the whore of Babylon. Look at it whoring itself out to other religions. Wow.
This is not the worship of Yahweh, the one true God. This is not Christianity at all.
There's only one God, and each of us is a language, so to speak, in order to arrive at God.
Qualcuno è Ski, qualcuno musulmano,
How the heck is it
qualcuno cristiano. Sono diversi cammini.
They're different paths.
There's a lot of different paths to hell. There's a lot of different paths to hell. You want me to prove it to you? I'll prove it to you right now. Watch. This is what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 through 14. Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it. In fact, most people who subscribe to this idea of, oh, we're all going to make it to heaven. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter who you put your trust in. Well, it's like God's at the top of this mountain, and there's all these different paths up to God. No, that's not what Jesus said. Jesus said, wide is the path to destruction, not to God.
Mm-hmm.
Many are the paths, you could kind of translate it to, many are the paths to destruction, to hell, to damnation, to separation from God. And most people are going down that path because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life. And there are few who find it. You know what else Jesus also said? John 14:6. Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. Jesus preached an exclusive gospel, an exclusive message of salvation. It's not, oh, you can kind of pick whatever you want and you can worship God according to your own understanding and it's going to work out for you. No, that's exactly what the devil wants you to think. And that's exactly what the Antichrist wants you to think. In fact, look at this. 1 John chapter 2, verse 22. We're going deep. I'm going deep with y'all because that lie is what is sending so many people to hell, thinking that they're right with God when they're not. They're right with a lowercase g God of their own understanding. It is a false God. It is a demon. It is an unclean spirit. It is not the one true God. Don't get it twisted, y'all. I love Muslims. I genuinely do. I love Hindus. I genuinely do. I love Buddhists. I love people in the New Age. I love them. I love them, though, enough to tell them the truth that Jesus Christ is the only way. Jesus Christ didn't come to planet Earth and let people brutally murder him so that he could be an option for salvation. Oh, yeah, like I'm going to literally come down from my throne in heaven, come and live amongst sinners, and let these sinners murder me, just so they can pick another option. Yeah, I'm just going to do this. Like, it's a way that you can come to God, but, don't don't pick this way if you don't want. No, Jesus, when he was about to be crucified, told his Father in heaven, he cried out in prayer. He said, God, if there's any other way to save these people, please let this cup of suffering pass from me. I don't want to go through what I'm about to go through, the suffering, the anguish, the separation spiritually from you by becoming a curse called sin so that they might become the righteousness of God, the ultimate exchange. If there's any other way, let me do it that way. But nevertheless, your will, not my will. What is Jesus demonstrating? There is no other way. There's no other way for you to be forgiven of your sin and to come into right standing relationship with God. None.
Amen.
Zero. Zilch. Nada. 1 John 2:22 says, who is a liar but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? Jesus is the Christ. Jesus is the anointed one. Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the only way. He, that person who denies that Jesus is the Christ, not a Christ, the Christ, he is Antichrist. That's why I'm being as bold as I am about what I'm saying. He is Antichrist who denies the Father and the Son.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a guy like this who's saying, oh, it's you can do it however you want to do it. What you're doing is you're denying the Father and you're denying the Son. You're denying what Jesus explicitly said and exclusively did. You cannot be a leader of a church and say, oh, there's a lot of different paths. That you technically can. You're allowed to, but you're not worshiping Jesus. You are not worshiping the God of the Bible, and you are not leading people to God. You are leading people to something else entirely. You are leading people to their destruction.
Amen.
So Pope Francis, I hope you see this. You probably won't. I hope you see this though, and you hear my heart. I have nothing against you personally, but what you are preaching is a false gospel. It is a false gospel, and I'll give you one more scripture to make my point here. This is how severe this is. Galatians chapter 1, verse 6. Listen to what Paul the Apostle says. He says, I marvel that you are turning away so soon from him who called you in the grace of Christ to a different gospel, to a different message. What this guy is saying is a completely different message than what Jesus preached, which is not another, but there are some who trouble you and want to pervert the gospel of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
But even if we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel to you than what we have preached to you, let him be accursed. Let him be accursed. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone preaches any other gospel to you than what you have received, let him be accursed. That's not Cap Chatfield's words. That's not even the Apostle Paul's words. This is the Apostle Paul speaking by the authority of God, by the power of the Holy Spirit. If anybody preaches any other gospel than the simple gospel that there is no way to be forgiven of your sin other than to receive the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who came down to planet Earth to live a life that you could never live without sin.
That's just common sense and common knowledge to us. The rest of the world aren't aware of this. It's so sad. The rest of the world, vast majority, but we know this is going on and they don't. So sad.
And without blame, without blemish, to die a death that you and I deserved, and to raise again by the power of the Holy Spirit from the dead. Our faith in him alone is what saves us.
Yep.
No good works, no good intention, no I'm going to worship this other thing and call God.
Then Christ is the only
those
path.
are all false gospels, and anybody who preaches anything other than the true gospel, let him be accursed.
Okay.
Big deal. This is a massive deal. And what this guy is doing, he is partnering with the Antichrist spirit, which will do what? Which will usher in a one world religion where anybody who believes in the one religion, you're in. But if you believe in that dogmatic thing called Christianity, that hateful, bigoted thing that wants to push people out of the faith, you're not going to be a part of this system. That's where we're headed, y'all. That's where this type of language, If you're a part of the Catholic Church, I want you to really consider who you're following, because if you're following this guy, you're going down the right path, which leads to destruction.
Yeah.
The
That's
one
what I
world
think.
religion, the one world government, the one world currency, which we read about in Revelation, which will set up the Antichrist system, where the Antichrist himself will take rule in the temple in Jerusalem and require everybody to worship him. If you don't worship him, you're not going to be able to participate in the economy and society. That's what this is leading to.
Been postponing your car check? At Pedders, we offer a brakes, steering and suspension check for only $28.
I reject it completely. But here's the good news. The good news is that you don't need to go down that path. You can make a decision today that you are going to be in right-standing relationship with God, regardless of what these other religious teachers are.
Yeah. Where is it?
It's a philanthropy forum that begins in November and runs through.
Craig, when I read your research from the last few months, I was shocked about how
Yeah, he's spot on.
2025 is their year for at least 5 or 6 laws, goals that, I've been asleep. I'm so glad that you're doing the research, but I'm shocked what they want to do in 2025. So we're going to get to each of them. But okay, so what's going on, and what's going on with King Charles? I mean, everyone said, oh, he's probably dying, or, what do you say?
He's not dying. He's made plans for the next 7 years. And so it starts with this business and philanthropy forum that begins in November and runs through 2030. And you'll do that at each COP event through COP 35. So beginning from COP 29 to COP 35, he's got 7 years planned that he's going to change the world.
Okay, so explain how, because there's some people who have never heard you, and so how is it going to try to change the world?
This is done through the Conference of the Parties, and his plan of change is actually in his book, Harmony, but it's also through the Sustainable Markets Initiative. That's the driving force behind all of this, and that is how he's going to do it through the merchants of the earth, the CEOs and the corporations, in order to be the driving force to make change.
Right, and then the change is really through what they say is the climate.
Yeah, he can't do anything politically because of his position, but he can go through the corporations. And so this allows him to do it in a backdoor manner and to bring about his great reset through businesses and the CEOs of the corporations.
Okay, now, but some people are saying, but we haven't heard from him, and we're not here, and so what's going on?
Well, he went back to work not too long ago and was working on a regular basis until they called for snap elections in Great Britain. And that now he has to withdraw and until July 5th of 2024. He has to basically be behind the scenes until July 4th. But from July 4th, July 5th is a new moon. So on the ancient calendar, the new moon is the new month. And so that would be the first month of summer on the ancient calendar. If you add
Good night, Talia. God bless.
to that, it arrives at December 31st or December 30th, depending on where you're at, of 2024. And that's the final new moon of the year. And that's when he wants to bring about his, right now, a small 7-year deal that increases his pay 45%. So it's a deal for wind power. That's what's going to increase his pay. Okay. But he plans to take that 45% and put it back into just reinvest in it. So he's not going to benefit from that, but he uses it to reinvest in more wind power.
Okay, now, when you said like the Great Reset, people will say, well, wasn't that Klaus Schwab? Now, I know Klaus Schwab is stepping down from the World Economic Forum, even though but does he or whoever with the World Economic Forum answer to King Charles?
The answers to King Charles is the Sustainable Markets Initiative is the one that's bringing about this change. And they announced in their Impact Report 2023 the coronation of our founder on May 6, 2023. So the founder of the SMI, the one who Klaus Schwab looks up to as the presenter of the Great Reset, they coronated their founder in 2023 on May 6.
Okay, saying that King Charles is the founder.
He's the founder
of the SMI's Sustainable Market.
And then it has his emblem basically says he's king over all the people in planet and the universe. You have those two emblems on that report.
Okay, so the two emblems would be the Terra Carta and
Terra Carta and the Astra Carta.
Okay. Now, everyone, of course, probably has been contacting you and me about what about the painting? What about the painting of King Charles? What do you say?
That painting is blasphemy. And I'll show you why. It's showing the metamorphosis of Prince Charles to King Charles. And in essence, it's copycat scenario of the transfiguration of Jesus Christ. Now, what people said about this thing blew up. And people are saying it looked like he's coming out of hell, or there's flames around him. I mean, every kind of, he did not get any honor from the people about this portrait. And that actually fulfills the prophecy in part of Daniel 11:21, I believe, where it states that the honor of kingship shall not be given to him. And this picture just blew up in his face, and he was given no honor by the people for this portrait.
Okay, interesting. Now, when you said it was depicting like the transfiguration and how?
From a cocoon to a butterfly. The monarch butterfly is on his shoulder.
Okay, and I saw people like blowing things up where, I mean, I could see like it looked like there was a witch in there, and then of course they're trying to show like the mirror image, and that some people say that that was like Moloch. I don't know, but what do you say?
That I think is a little bit of a stretch. I don't think that's the intent of the artist. The artist's full intent was to show the transformation. But it is interesting what you do see in the mirror image. You can't deny you do see some sort of image there. People can have their imagination what it may or may not be.
Right. Now, I mean, I have my theory, but my theory too is, I mean, yours is more deeper, but my theory is that when they have these kind of like red backgrounds like that it's almost kind of like saying a disaster is about to happen, that they want to, well, anyway, that's, you all know, you can read between the lines, but that's just my opinion.
Tyranny. Usually tyranny is on its way. Communism.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe Biden actually did the same thing not too long ago. He did a video where he had all the red background, and you see it with a lot of the Soviet people in the past too. So it's all, that red is always a symbol of control.
Ah, very interesting. Right. I saw like Joe Biden did it in 2022, and yeah, okay. But I didn't realize, I guess, that it had a history with the Soviet Union too. Very interesting. Yep. So what's going on with King Charles' goals and the Pope? What's going on behind the scenes?
King Charles and Pope Francis, through the SMI, have merged his Terra Carta and the Astra Carta with the Laudato Si and the Laudato Deum. And so there's two aspects of this. The Terra Carta has 17, or in the Astra Carta connected to the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And the Pope takes a portion of those goals and tries to implement those through the religious sector. So I believe his set of goals is 7 goals. He began his 7-year deal, I believe, in 2021. And King Charles strengthened the 7-year deal. It's not the strengthening of Daniel 9:27 yet, but he helped bring about a strengthening of the 7-year deal on December 13th of last year.
Diane, are you still working at that car place?
That's good for 7 years, and then they'll do it again. So the Vatican's theme for this year is political love. So they're bringing the religious political system of Babylon and they're bringing the political side and they're bringing them together. So you have a merging of the politics behind this thing and the religious system behind this thing, the merging as one. Just so what you're going to get out of it is a revival of the Holy Roman Empire.
Ah, very interesting. And I found it interesting of what they said, that that this would be a universal fraternity of pilgrims of hope in, here we go, 2025. So that
begins January 1st of 2025.
Right. So that's just one of the 2025s that you've uncovered.
Pope Francis has declared 2025 to be a gift of grace and merited favor as he seeks to help the world that has been harmed from the pandemic and the ongoing wars to arrive at a rebirth of which we all feel the urgency. So they want something to come about beginning January 1st of next year.
Okay, so speaking of 2025, again, what is the climate promise?
So the UN chief calls for all hands on deck at the Climate Promise 2025 to accelerate efforts from local to international efforts to take more ambitious steps to ensure that global temperature does not
Okay, Di, it's closed, is
1.5
it?
degrees Celsius. And so this is the UN Development Plan's Climate Promise has already worked with 128 countries. And Mr. Guterres, Antonio, says the need is urgent. And this March was the planet's hottest month on record. What we are seeing is just a preview of the disaster that awaits us unless we limit the long-term rise in global temperature to 1.5. So this is what Antonio Guterres is saying. And they're saying this is still possible, but the time limit is not for long. So there's not much time left. All countries must play in their part. So you don't incorporate everyone. And he states that we need concrete steps to get finance flowing and enable a surge in climate ambition. And he said the G20 must lead the way by submitting a robust, ambitious,
I bet you are,
new
Di.
national climate plans well ahead of COP30 as well as 2025. So we have a big transition coming between the Pact of the Future this year and COP30 of 2025.
Right, which we'll get to the Pact of the Future, for the Future, which will be in September. But I just wanted to talk about with the climate promise, it's like, okay, there's this urgency. It's like saying we don't have time. So it's like 2025, we've got to implement all of this. And then when it says that all countries must play their part, including the group, and I got this from your research, a group of, G20, which accounts for around 80% of emissions. So basically that's.
Okay, Lynn, God bless.
They're blaming
We
the
love you,
United
Lynn.
States, they're blaming other countries, that it's all of our fault, but yeah, it's like mostly our fault. So we're gonna have to really make big changes, like driving electric cars or scooters.
So this change that they're wanting by January 1st of 2025, but if you go to the new moons, so December 30th and 31st of this year, depending on where you're at, this is when the transition must take place, is at the end of the year. And then you go back to December 13th of last year, that's the exact same day on the lunar calendar that they had the UAE consensus. If you go back 12 months from the UAE consensus, you have the exact same day on the lunar calendar that King Charles did his first address, Christmas address to the world on sustainability.
So very.
Call for electricity.
And help families enjoy on a Sunday feast. Willpower can help you do amazing things, but even your willpower can use a little help now and then. Relieve nicotine cravings.
So very interesting that they're like sticking to like the calendar, like the biblical calendar.
They're following in some aspect the biblical calendar.
Okay, can you explain Pact for the Future?
The Pact of the Future is a meeting September 22nd and 23rd at the United Nations in New York at the UN General Assembly, wherein nations will agree and sign the so-called deal.
Wow.
The Pact is expected to call for declaring for a planetary emergency.
Sounds like his dad needs to give him a good kick up the arse, Diane.
Let's see. This is to address the gaps in global governance, reaffirm existing commitments, including the Sustainable Development Goals. This is the whole push is the SDGs and the United Nations Charter. The initial draft was released in January of 2024. They just updated that, and I'll give you a little some of these actions that we just updated. It proposes overhauling existing institutions. So they want to overhaul everything, reset everything, including those governing international peace and security, global finance, development, and new digital technology. So they're pushing for this new digital system everywhere. And also the key to this whole thing is on peace and security. So their first action is that we will take bold and ambitious, accelerated, just, transformative actions to realize the 2030 agenda and leave no one behind. So that's their theme. Once again, leave no one behind.
Yeah, when they say leave no one behind, it sounds like so kind and sweet, but what they mean is everyone is going to have to abide by this.
Yes, or you're well, we already know from Revelation what happens to you if you don't abide by it, because the Antichrist will kill all those that refuse to follow his way. So you have all those that are martyred in the tribulation. So everybody has to follow that, or you're dead. It says we will close the SDG financing gap by providing sustainable, affordable, accessible, predictable development finance and effective means of implementation. And then action 3 is their global trading system is the engine for sustainable development. So this is all the trade. They'll ensure that all the trading is the motivating, basically through your CEOs and your corporations. That's what's going to drive the engine for this. Their number 4 action is to end poverty. That'll never happen. The Bible says the poor will always be with us.
Yeah, well, also, back to end poverty. Yeah. I don't know what when people are trusting, let's say the UN or the government, tell me, what are they doing now to help the poor? I mean, just tell me. I don't understand why these people are trusting them when they're not even doing anything right now, but go on.
Well, like you said, they're not, look at the cities, they're full of, the homeless people have taken over. Seattle, Washington, for example, you have to kind of keep your blinders on the sides. You don't want to see what's under the bypasses or what's around the corner. They're absolutely everywhere, even in the small towns that they're starting to show up everywhere. They don't do anything. But probably the number 1 issue, obviously there's people in there that can't afford to live anymore because of the extreme fluctuations of inflation. But majority of the issue is drugs. They allow all these drugs, and then you have an influx of those living in the street. We will promote gender equality. So we're going to see a big push for that in June of 2024 for gender equality. And then we'll protect and promote culture as an integral component of sustainable development.
There's a guy who writes for the daily newspaper I read, and he just come back from America, and he says everywhere you go in America, you can smell marijuana. Every city you go to, you can smell marijuana on the streets. He said it was really bad.
We will combat climate change. So they're basically, when they say we will combat, they're going to war against climate change, but they're really going to war against God, because God is what has given them the climate.
Right. And we've done other programs, and when they say they're going to go, do that, they're going to do it through limiting, changing your way of life. For instance, like the 15-minute cities, or having people live in these small little houses, or making sure that you can't drive, or you're going to have to pay tax if you drive too far, or have an electric car. I mean, they basically want to totally change your life, and so that's what they mean by control. But yeah, go on.
And they'll spray you from the air, according to Bill Gates. So it appears we're already there, but that's another point.
Yeah, just look in the skies.
We will accelerate our efforts to protect the environment. That's another one. But the number 1 goal of this whole thing is international peace and security. And that's where I want to emphasize this. He says we will redouble our efforts to build peaceful and inclusive societies by strengthening resilience and comprehensively address underlying drivers and root causes of armed conflict, violence, and insecurity, and their consequences by accelerating the investment in and implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs. They will also provide equal access to justice, protect civic space, and uphold human rights for all, including through promoting a culture of peace and enhancing human security. So here we go, peace and security again. It's repeated over and over. Ensure that such spending on arms does not come at the expense of investment, sustainable development, and building sustainable peace. And request the Secretary General to provide analysis on the impact of global increase in military expenditures on the achievement of the SDGs by the end of the 79th session. So that's huge.
Okay, so when you said the 79th, so when is that? September?
That's this September. So this must be accomplished by this September at the end of the UN General Assembly.
Man.
We will ensure people affected by humanitarian crisis receive the support they need. We will diffuse tensions, promote cooperation and understanding between member states, and seek the specific settlement of disputes. We will build and sustain peace at the national level. And we will accelerate the implementation of our commitments on women in peace and security. So women's a big player in this. And we will address environmental and climate impacts on peace and security. We will adapt peace operations to support peace enforcement to better respond to existing challenges and new realities. We will pursue a future free from terrorism. We will combat transnational organized crime and illicit financial flows. We will accelerate progress towards a world free of nuclear weapons. Well, we know Revelation is probably not going to happen. We will uphold our disarmament obligations. So we want to disarm everybody, but you know, China probably won't disarm. Russia's probably not going to disarm. We will address the risk posed by emerging domains and technologies. And we will address the risk posed by information, communication, technology, and artificial intelligence. So there they go after the AI as well. So very, very interesting. And then to go on under science and technology, we said we will seize the opportunities presented by science, technology, and innovation for the benefit of all people on the planet. So this is something that's going to be forced on everybody. It is this path for the future.
Right, and yeah, it's just interesting, like you said, how much they keep on saying peace and safety, because, okay, Craig, there's some people who are watching, they don't know anything about Bible prophecy. What does it say as far as peace and safety? That
was so he does like
predicted, prophesied 2,000 years ago.
He's probably giving you a hard time to get your attention. He's probably got a crush on you, Di.
What does the Bible say about when they say peace and safety?
It says in 1 Thessalonians 5:3 that while they are saying peace and security, then sudden destruction will come. So it's at that moment this thing gets implemented, that's when the sudden destruction comes. So it doesn't mean they can sign this thing in September, and they probably will, but it's the implementation date, whenever that day is, that we need to be watching. And it looks like to be January 1st of 2025.
Okay, and I was like looking at some of the list of some of their their goals too. They were saying meaningfully include young people in global decision making. That one hit me because of what's going on with our educational system and how their children are already being brainwashed. So they're like, oh, of course we'll trust you now because you think like we do. And then reform the international financial architecture, and I found that interesting too because of trying to have everything digital. And then what you were talking about with technology combined with digital, just where everybody would have to get an implant, maybe like the Neuralink or whatever, however they're going to sell it. But the Neuralink or the chip or whatever, it's going to control you. That's why in the Bible it talks about that once you get this mark where you can't buy or sell anything without it, once you get it, you're basically, that's it for you. You can't become a believer in Jesus. That's it. So, and I never quite understood that, but I realize now through this technology, they'll be able to control you. So, and then transform education, which they've already been doing that. And yeah, any other thoughts regarding the UN meeting?
This UN meeting, the number one thing to watch, in my opinion, is their need to better respond to global shocks. They're going to repeat this over and over and over again. Some guide that they're going to use for the next global shock. And that maximizes the use of the Secretary General's convening power in the form of an emergency platform. Now, the World Health Organization just failed on a similar plan. This is a much larger plan that's trying to be pushed by September. So these global shocks, we can read all about them in the Book of Revelation, and you'll see what they are. So basically, this is good preparation for what's coming, the tribulation. They're telling us from last September at the UN General Assembly that their path forward is going to go through much tribulation. So they're telling that they use that word. It's like, there we go. And they're telling us it's for the length of time as well. So last year they said it's 7 years. So we'll see what they say this year. So.
Right, but with global shocks, I mean, that could be anything. But of course, Bill Gates now is talking about the bird flu and saying that 80% of the world's population can die. So they're always using scare tactics.
They want to account for the future. So this is making practical steps to take account of long-term impact on their decisions. And then they want to measure human progress more effectively. But this is another control tactic. So they're going to want to see their progress. They want to agree on a vision of their digital technology, which we discussed, as a motor for human progress that can deliver full benefits while minimizing potential harm. They want to commit to integrity in public information so that we're going to have, they want more censorship. And in fact, I did a report last year at 37 weeks ago to COP28, and I just got censored for that because the photo wasn't to their liking. So it had an Israel flag and a British flag, and they said that was it's not allowed on their on Facebook platform.
Yeah, I've gotten so much censoring on Facebook that I finally basically gave up. That's one of the reasons why. I mean, I'm on there here and there, but yep, censorship was like too much.
So number 8 is they want to advance the peaceful and sustainable use of outer space. So we see this with the King's Aster Carta, as well as the driving force behind this. And number 1 is to agree on a new agenda for peace. So this is a brand new agenda, and update our understanding of all forms and domains of threats and adapt our toolbox to prevent and manage hostilities on land, at sea, space, and cyberspace. This is full control everywhere throughout the universe. And we already talked about how they want to transform education. They've been doing that way back when. If you have your kids in public school, probably best to get them out. And UN 2.0 is to adapt the basic UN practices on data, communications, innovation, strategic foresight, performance and results, and more. So it is better positioned to support all the above things we've just discussed and the challenges in the future. So they want to meet all these goals they've had in the past and then make it greater, a new pact for an undisclosed amount of time. So this meeting in September, they will state how long this is for, but until September, we don't.
Okay, Craig, what is the Rome Call document?
The Rome Call document is the tech giant Cisco Systems that has joined Microsoft, IBM, in signing onto a Vatican-sponsored pledge to ensure that AI, or artificial intelligence, is developed and used ethically and to benefit the common good. So everybody has to join in on this, and it's being pushed by the Roman Catholic Church. Cisco Systems Chief Executive Chuck Robbins has signed the document known as the Rome Call and has met privately with Pope Francis, stating that the AI must be designed, used, and regulated to serve and protect the dignity of all human beings without discrimination in their environments. And so we know from Revelation 13 that there's a mark coming one day, a certification mark, and this is one way. This is like the beginning step of pushing that agenda.
I know.
I'm a proud Ningy woman. A big driver for me is my family.
Wow.
I wouldn't understand my Aboriginal culture or be the person I am now if it wasn't for them.
Come on, ads.
I know, it's like you're so crazy. You're just like saying, wait, Vatican and AI, what does anything, it's like, what does it have to do with anything, with each other? And yet it explains it, like you said, in the book of Revelation.
And this is coming at the same time as their deadline for digital ID. This is in order to fly. So by May 7th of 2025, you have to have some form of real ID or digital ID in order to fly.
Yeah, so it's just interesting because here we have another 2025. The Rome Call document, which you just talked about, is 2025. And then now the digital ID, which you're talking about now, that their deadline now is May 7th, 2025. Any other thoughts about that?
And I'll emphasize, this thing has been pushed out over and over and over again. So I remember it being 2020, and it's been pushed out for several years. And Donald Trump helped stall that while he was in office. But this is a worldwide global thing, so one man isn't going to stop. He is probably going to slow it down this time around. This concept they have begins in 2025 and beyond. So that's the whole thing. So this transition for digital ID is pretty much global, and then it's forever. So
and the big Democrat cities, that seems to be where all the riots are happening.
According to these guys.
And that's right up their alley, so they're not going to stop it. We know that.
And so we know from the Bible, it says, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in the right hand or on their foreheads, that no man may buy or sell. Revelation 13, 16 through 17. And you can Google certification mark, ID 2020, and all that information is already verbally being used. So and they're waiting for that next pandemic.
Talking about pandemic, what is the Pandemic Preparedness Day? And it's at the end of the year. It's like going right to 2025. But can you explain that?
It's scheduled for December 27th of this year, and the UN has a day designated to prepare for the next pandemic. So that's huge, because we know, based on history, that most of these pandemics come with winter. And so that would be something very interesting to watch. I mean, that includes everything in the past 100 years. You don't get a flu in the middle of the summer, you get a flu in the winter.
And now another 2025 that I was like reading with your research was the biometric payment. What does that have to do with 2025 too?
Yeah, I'm up the coast.
So JP Morgan and Bank of America are gearing up to launch their broad biometric payment systems that will be made available to all retailers, and to make it available to all U.S. retailers by early of 2025. This will enable shoppers to make purchases without pulling out a physical piece of paper or currency.
No, I don't get the flu either.
Credit and debit cards.
I haven't had the flu for years, Vast.
The payment system, but using your face. It's also for getting into your bank account. It's using your face. So Bank of America is already doing that. And I believe JP Morgan's probably right there as well. So there are some companies already implementing this system. Panera Bread is already implementing this system. So you can pay with your face. Also, you pay with your hand already at the Amazon One. You just walk in and pay with your hand. So we already have that system in place.
Right, and then you were saying too that there's a professional sports franchises that are already using it too, with this biometric payment. But I mean, of course, that's going to really lead to the digital, everybody being digitized.
Yeah, everybody. And then so Birch is reporting this, and I actually follow them on Linked, so I get all of this updates on Linked. Once they start, so it's just a matter of time before this technology is installed in all retail stores, and they'll be banning anyone from buying or selling products unless you're remotely digitally marked. At that point, we are at Revelation 13.
Okay, right. So again, the biometric payment, they're saying they want to make it available to all U.S. retailers by early next year, by 2025. I mean, 2025, we need to be praying a lot, and but I still believe in the Lord's protection. But Craig, there's people who are watching and they don't know how to be saved. They don't know how to know Jesus personally. Can you explain?
The way to be saved is to believe that Jesus came, he died on the cross for our sins. He was buried and became sin for us, and he rose again on the third day and was the first of all creation. And that's what we need to believe to be saved. It's in 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4, and that's the plan of salvation laid out by the Apostle Paul. So we must believe the gospel, the good news, in order to be saved. And we will be able to escape this, and some people will have to suffer through it because there's lots of martyrs that live during the tribulation. There's going to be a lot of martyrdom. But either way, there's salvation. So.
Yeah, well, I ended up becoming a believer by reading up about Bible prophecy because I was not brought up in a Christian home. And when I ended up reading some books about Bible prophecy, and that, oh my goodness, here, everything that is going on in the world was prophesied 2,000 and even more, thousands of years ago. That totally changed my life.
Bloody glare.
And that's what convinced me that, all right, yep, Jesus is real. I mean, it even prophesies in the Tanakh, the Old Testament, that he would be denied and that some would not believe in him. So, but reading up about Bible prophecy is so amazing. And that's why I do this program, because I want everyone to know Jesus. Craig, any other thoughts?
Well, just to show how close we are, the Temple Institute in Israel has 5 red heifers, and one of those has to be sacrificed. One of those has to be good enough with no gray hairs.
It's 3 months old.
Year to be sacrificed for a new temple. And the Temple Institute stated this spring that sacrifice will take place when their King Mashiach is revealed. And so we have 1 year period, or less than 1 year period right now, that those red heifers are still able to be sacrificed without giving you that first gray hair. And that happens only after their king is revealed.
Wow, so they're believing that for 2025.
They're believing that for 2025. It has to happen. They have a specific date in mind, and that's not important.
I can't stop the glare, guys.
In the Old Testament. So what we'll see after this event, sometime after this event, is there's a 7-year peace agreement or confirming of agreement between Israel and multiple nations, and that could be CEOs and corporations as well. That fulfills Daniel 9:27 and Revelation 17:12. We'll see a world government forming in front of us, but that world government takes hold at the beginning of the tribulation, Revelation 13:3, Revelation 17:12 through 13. Russia and Iran will invade Israel. That's sometime believed to be sometime at the beginning of the tribulation. There'll be severe inflation. So right now everything is double priced. So we're paying double for food, double for rent, double for your car, double for gas. But in Revelation 6:5 through 6, it describes something so severe that your day's wages, all you can afford is a meal at the end of the day. We see the mark of the beast, and we discussed that. We have a certification mark that we see forming right in front of us. There'll be millions of Christian martyrs, Revelation 6:9, Revelation 7:13 through 17. There's a total loss of freedom once this begins. That's Revelation 13:16 through 18. And there'll be billions of humans die, Revelation 6:8, that's opening of the seals. And Revelation 9:18, so a huge amount of population reduction begins during the tribulation. In fact, the Antichrist will be called death. So when he went at the midpoint of the tribulation, what comes with him is massive death. Israel burdens the world. So we see that already happening today, where all the nations are going against them. And we just saw 3 countries issue a statement that Palestine should be a state. So Israel burdens the world, Zechariah 12:3. So the conflicts surrounding Israel are going to increase dramatically during the tribulation. And we have the world pharmakeia, deception that takes place, Revelation 18:23b. Sorcery comes from the Greek pharmakeia. So this comes on the back end of the December 27th event that they're planning for the next pandemic. And we see that deception forming up already. So that's what to expect. I believe in a pre-trib rapture. Some people don't, but either way, you need to trust God. So
yeah.
Well, right, and whether it's like pre-trib or post-trib, which every different people start. If it's pre-trib, we want to be ready. We want to be ready whenever it is. But what I find scary is if some people just go, well, it's not going to happen for a while, so I could just kind of. No, we want to be ready now. Now, Craig, how can people?
You need to be ready. You always need to be ready. You're ready by believing in Jesus Christ and His finished work on the cross. You can't add works to your salvation. It's simple belief.
Right, so but that belief actually changes you. That
belief will bring about lots of change in you from day one. In fact, my grandfather was a farmer. He had every curse word that came out of him all day long. And while on a tractor, there was a pastor that came to him while he was farming and led him to the Lord. And that from that day forward, the vocabulary from him changed. And his cows, he told us that his cows did not understand him the next day. So because his language had changed, so they weren't following his command because all that vocabulary was taken away from him. So that's how salvation can change a person.
Wow, right. If anyone said, he just realized that he should be, no, come on, in one day you can't just change your vocabulary. Maybe if you worked on it for a long period of time. But there's just so many amazing things when you accept the Lord. And I've talked to so many people with their testimonies. Some people just instantly get off of drugs. It's their life changes. And honestly, you become the real you. And how can...
I instantly got off methadone and I did not hang out one day. And I've come off methadone before and it takes 3 months to get over it. But I didn't even hang out one day.
And people follow you on Facebook, Craig, because you have amazing updates keeping everybody informed.
They can follow me on Craig on Facebook, and they can follow me I post occasionally on Signs of the End on Facebook, and also Rapture Watchers in all caps on Facebook, and that's a group. So my private one is you're going to get one post a day approximate.
Okay, all right, well, thank you.
The lawlessness, Diane, it's just going to get worse. Okay, guys, I'll finish with the next one. I forget what it is. Israeli News Live, aliens living on Earth. I'm going to hang up after this one, guys.
Channel. Aliens may already live on Earth. Good afternoon, friends. Stephen Benoon here with Israeli News Live on our Patreon channel. Aliens may already live on Earth, Harvard researchers, I should say plural, say that. This is actually on Newsweek. Can you believe it? Newsweek. You know, at any rate, there, let me just go into the article here. The video there is just where they're talking there, just giving some of the disclosure they're talking about there in the government. A study by Harvard social science researchers suggests that aliens may have been living on Earth for a while. Researcher paper, which has yet to be peer-reviewed, suggests that life forms from other worlds could be living underground on Earth or within the moon.
When a meteor hits the moon, it rings like a bell for a couple of hours. It's very commonly accepted that the moon's hollow, or at least honeycombed.
You know what gets me is how long have I been saying this, right? I've told you guys about the secret bases on the moon, and we're talking about bases that have been there for thousands of years. Underground bases. In fact, that's one of the very places where some of the elite here on the Earth are going to take refuge when this Planet X comes rolling through the neighborhood and is causing so much havoc on the Earth, which, by the way, one of the things that I've always been told about that we see happening right now is the weather events, strange weather events.
Yeah, that's true.
The increase of storm activity, the increase, and when I say storm activity, I'm talking about, like I was talking,
like flash floods in cities that never get flash floods, like at Mecca and Petra. The floods are all over the planet. Diane posts them all.
Inline storms with over 100-mile-per-hour winds. Now, when I first said that, what was that, 3 years ago? I think I first brought that out. You know, people thought I was blooming nuts for saying that. Inline winds. Now, inline means, in other words, a storm coming across the United States. It's not a hurricane spinning in circles. I realize, like up in Michigan and stuff, you know, during the certain times of the year, they get up to 70, 75-mile-an-hour winds, straight line winds. They're used to that. That's kind of common. But when you're talking about over 100 miles an hour, you know, category 2 or 3 hurricane force winds coming through town on a more frequently basis, that's just totally unheard of in the United States. Well, sure enough, after I did that report, it wasn't long that across the Northwest there, we had storms roll in that had over, I think it was 110-mile-per-hour inline winds, you know, but everybody kind of played that down. You know, it's just a fluke. And then before long, another one happened. Well, then it kind of died down for a little bit, but this year, inline winds, 100 miles an hour better has become almost the norm. Even when I was down in Florida, down there recently, Northwest Florida there, we were having inline winds there over 100 miles an hour while I was sleeping, mainly just north. I'm down in Milton area, which is right by Pensacola, Florida, but they were having inline winds just north of me up in the area of around Jay, Florida, when the storms rolled in, that as I was leaving to come back to Tennessee, the power lines, one after another, after another, after another, were just snapped in half. And I'm like bewildered by the sight. At first, I thought a tornado must have, you know, I knew we had some storms that night. In fact, when I got up, I had gutters laying all over the yard and stuff. And I'm even thinking to myself, I don't remember a storm happening last night. Did I sleep through a storm? You know, of course, I'm used to storms down there. You know, you live on the Gulf Coast. There's a lot of storms, right? But I'm thinking, wow, that must have been some pretty good winds there to blow the gutters off of my house. And so, you know, didn't think of it. And then I had a lot of siding blown off as well. I'm like, well, this is kind of wild, right? So then I'm headed out later that morning, headed back home to Tennessee, driving up this highway there. And for miles, I began, you know, probably after about a mile, and I got into the second, third mile and still seeing telephone poles snapped everywhere. Then I began to realize, wait a minute, there's no way a tornado could have just ran 15 miles up a highway here and snapped every telephone pole along the way. I mean, that's a pretty intelligent tornado to be able to do that, right? So then I started thinking, wow, we must have had inline storm come through here. Well, sure enough, I did find an article in the paper online later, Pensacola News Journal, reporting over 100-mile-an-hour inline winds. And they were showing pictures of the telephone poles snapped in half. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And of course, you know, it was several, you know, I'd seen some other ones through the Midwest and stuff like that that were happening that were causing devastation. And we're talking about tornadoes, massive sized tornadoes like I've never seen before, you know, and seeing these on the news very frequently. And of course, all these, I bring this up, why? Because this is what Planet X is going to be all about. It brings about all these phenomenals in weather. Then you have the volcanoes. You have, you know, earthquakes. I was even told that earthquakes will become a norm to be 8.0 and higher. Now, we haven't seen that quite as of yet, but I was told it's coming. Temperatures. Right now, we're seeing record-breaking temperatures in both directions, cold and hot. I've been told, too, that you'll see the reversals. Like where it should be hot, it's going to be cold. And where it should be cold, it's going to be hot. And we've already been seeing those type things happening. What about the snowstorm that hit, not snowstorm, but it was a hailstorm that hit Saudi Arabia that blanketed the earth and made it look like it was covered in snow? You know? So then, of course, the same intelligence guy sitting there sharing with me about, you know, the aliens that live in the earth. We've been working with aliens for years and years. They do live underground. They do live in the earth. The same guy tells me about the bases on the moon, things like that. And now I'm reading here on no less than Newsweek.com in the article, Alien Life, Extraterrestrial Living, U.S. search words there. But anyway, let me continue on, though. The research paper, which is yet to be peer-reviewed, suggests that life from, okay, right, we read that, on other worlds could be living underground on Earth or within the moon. And the UFOs and other unidentified anomalous phenomena may be evidence of them getting around. The study suggests an unconventional explanation of UAP, with authors of the paper hailing from Harvard University Human Flourishing Program, which researches the factors that contribute to human well-being and flourishing. The paper has been taken down from the ResearchGate since Newsweek published this article, but it's still accessible using Internet Archive. UAP and any objects or phenomena that cannot be immediately identified or explained by known human-made or natural sources. The authors point out that the A in UAP represents anomalous in their study rather than aerial, as is commonly the case, because some UAP are not only airborne, but may be, lost my spot there, because UAP are not only airborne, but may travel underwater.
Will do, Dolly.
UAP have been reported in various forms, including spheres, discs, triangles, and other shapes, ranging in size from small orbs to large craft. Many exhibit flight patterns and maneuvers that defy conventional aerodynamics, such as sudden changes in direction, high speeds, and the ability to hover without apparent propulsion system. So let's see. Last summer, 36-year-old Air Force veteran David Grush caused a media storm from after he said that a top secret U.S. military program had found the wreckage of several fully intact, unidentified aircraft, some of which contained dead non-human pilots. A 2023 report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence found that there were 510 UAP sightings in 2022, higher than the 366 seen in 2021. Of these, 171 were considered to appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. Now, you know what's funny though? They tell you this, but we've already reverse engineered a lot of these different crafts that we have found. You know, this is part of the disclosure program. And this is something the government has been planning on doing little by little, revealing this information to you so that in 2026, when these alien entities appear and become part of your daily public life, you won't be so alarmed at their existence and their presence there. So get ready. It's coming. And I just wanted to kind of share some of that information with you guys here. And I will certainly be now, by the way, I've been going through a withdrawal of what they call prednisone. Prednisone is a medication that is used to deal with inflammation in the body. My doctor.
Diane, I took a screenshot of the whole lot, so I'll read it when this is over. Thanks.
Put me on it a couple of years ago because I blew 3 discs, 2 of those severe in my lower spinal cord there, which caused me to lose the feeling in my left leg. And as a result of that, I finally decided, look, I got to get off of this stuff. I've had enough and I'm not taking it any longer. Well, at first I thought I had the flu. I did not know that coming up.
I'm out too, guys. God bless everyone. See you tomorrow. Bas, I'm going to do the Super Soldier one tomorrow. Looking forward to it. God bless everyone.